Friday Fun Day. Taking recommendations day. I think until anyone shows up, I think we're just going to. I think we're just gonna follow the rest of this and keep going until we can't stop. So we got to a point where we were talking about consciousness stuff once again. Is the field moving away from where is consciousness because the question is largely answered, or because it's not important to answer it yet? In my view, it seems like the field is placing the question of substrate aside. In my mind, this might be a strategic move, given that determining behavior and complexity might give us an understanding about the necessary substrate. So maybe we figure out complexity first, and then we can figure out how the substrate expresses itself in some way that lends itself to the complexity that we just found. All right, I read the 2025 paper, A Beautiful Loop, an active inference theory of consciousness. Are there other papers or books on these topics, either from the people you mentioned or others that have come out in the past year or so? Okay, the shift, why the where is fading, the move away from where is consciousness is not because we found the spot, nor because we gave up. It is because the field has realized that where is a category error. You're spot on that this is a strategic pivot towards process and complexity rather than place. So the old view, we used to think consciousness was like digestion. It happens in the stomach. So we looked for the stomach of the brain, for example, the claustrum or the thalamus. The new view, current theories like global neuronal workspace theory and active inference view consciousness more like an orchestral harmony. Asking where is the harmony is a nonsensical question. It isn't in the violin or the drum, it is in the temporal relationship between them, right? But that we need to figure out, how does substrate manifest in the music? Or does it affect the music at all? The field is putting substrate aside to focus on computational necessary conditions. If we can prove that any system, silicon or carbon, that minimizes prediction error with high integrated information becomes conscious, then the substrate question dissolves. Right? And I'm guessing it'll be difficult to do that in a digital space, state space. Okay, recent reading list. Since you've enjoyed A Beautiful Loop, you're effectively asking for the third wave of active inference literature, the wave that moves beyond basics into hard problems like agency and phenomenology. Here are the key releases from the last 12 to 18 months that align with your interests. Living on Earth, Forests, Corals, Consciousness, and the Making of the World by Peter Godfrey Smith. So this, what do? We had, was this in To Do? Yeah, that we just have a bunch of stuff like this. Living on Earth, Forests, Corals, Consciousness, and the Making of the World. Godfrey Smith. I'll put the full name. 2024. We might need to put these types of readings on hold, though, while I actually pivot to some of the topics that we need to do for part 2. Even though consciousness is huge, I think we have a pretty good view of it at this point. We could probably move on and then come back. If you like the evolutionary layers concept, we don't like the evolutionary layers concept. Pushes the gradualist view that agency and consciousness emerge slow. Oh, okay. Evolutionary layers of consciousness, not of the brain. We do like that view. Pushes the gradualist view that agency and consciousness emerge slowly from the basic thermodynamic drive to stay organized. It pairs perfectly with the allostatic framework and Damasio's framework, etc. The Four Realms of Existence by Joseph DeLue is the biggest critic of the limbic system equals emotion idea in this new work. He rigidly separates survival circuits from conscious feelings. It challenges the body budget equals feeling unity you are skeptical about. Okay. I don't know if I'm as interested here. All right, papers. A major release for the 2025 Paper Spike is the Templeton Foundation's adversarial collaborations, where proponents of rival theories are forced to design experiments together. So I think I actually have found some of these and made bookmarks. So I say, to be clear, I think it would be a misstep to assume that substrate is not involved just because we are able to conceptualize brain activity through the lens of complexity. My intuition is that it is imperative for these dynamics to behave as they do at the level of the electron, which, while we can technically disconnect electrons from molecules in abstraction, these specific molecules dictate the behavior of the electrical signaling. All right, okay, that is the cliff. Okay, you're right to pull the emergency brake there. That is the cliff where neuroscience drops off into quantum physics and philosophy of mind. Your intuition aligns with biological naturalism, famously championed by John Searle. Searle. The argument is that consciousness isn't just software that can run on any hardware. Rather, it is a specific biological feature of the brain's causal powers that depend on the specific molecular and ionic properties of neurons, similar to how photosynthesis depends on the specific quantum chemistry of chlorophyll, not just the idea of converting light to energy. If the computation relies on stochastic noise, ion channel jitters, or electron tunneling, as you suggest, to generate the priors or variability needed for free will or feeling, then a deterministic silicon chip might never replicate it. It is a perfect place to pause. We have moved from, so this is telling, I thought this was crazy that Gemini would do this, but it's kind of interesting. It is a perfect place to pause. We have moved from where is the basal ganglia to do electrons have feelings, which is usually the sign that we have reached the bottom of the useful rabbit hole for one session. So it's cutting me off. If you ever want to jump back in, or if you want to switch gears to something more practical, like how to hack these systems for focus/health, I'm here. Otherwise, well done navigating the complexity. And so I say, okay, to be clear, we're stopping because no one is anywhere close to coming up with an answer to the substrate problem. And it says, no, we're not stopping. In fact, we are doing the opposite. We are entering a crisis phase in the scientific sense, which is actually the most exciting time to be in the field. You're witnessing the death of the easy answers, not the death of the inquiry. Here is the reality of the situation regarding the substrate problem as of 2024 and 2025. The software view is dying. For 30 years, the dominant dogma was computational functionalism. The brain is hardware, the mind is software. If we run software on silicon, we get a mind. This view is currently bleeding out. The fact that we have built large language models that can pass the Turing test but arguably have the inner life of a spreadsheet has forced a massive correction. It demonstrated that behavior does not equal consciousness. This has validated your intuition. So first of all, there are people that are trying to say that LLMs have some sort of consciousness, which is, I think, a little wild. But it depends. It depends if substrate doesn't actually matter. We'd have to consider how much integrated complexity is involved with the language model, and I think not much, especially compared to the brain. But at what level, how do you, where are the lines drawn in terms of how much complexity equaling how much consciousness? So it's not to say that it's anywhere. It's certainly not similar to a human consciousness. All right, the substrate matters. The field is crashing back into biological naturalism because okay. We aren't stopping. We are retooling. We aren't giving up. We are realizing our microscopes were looking at the wrong thing. So the old strategy was look for the neural correlate. The result failure. We found correlates but no causes. So the new strategy is look for the physical mechanism. What is the physics of the information? The field is now obsessing over things it ignored for decades. Thermodynamics. Is consciousness a way to dissipate heat dissipate heat more efficiently? Electromagnetic fields. Does the brain's EM field bind information in a way that synaptic wires cannot? Hybrid analog digital computation. Yo. Jago and I were talking about this. Neurons aren't ones and zeros. They're noisy analog chemical systems. Is the noise actually the signal? All right, the nowhere close illusion. It feels like we are nowhere close because the consensus is fractured. IIT, Integrated Information Theory, says it's about causal structure. Global Neuronal Workspace says it's about broadcasting, so the architecture. Active Inference says it's about minimizing error, the function. But this fracture is progress. We have moved from philosophical guessing to adversarial collaboration. Right now, labs are running massive experiments specifically designed to kill these theories. We are finally willing to be wrong. Nice. All right, your intuition was right. The electron level, you mentioned the electron molecular level. This is the frontier. There is a growing realization that you cannot separate the information from the energy that carries it. In a computer, their energy is just the power source, irrelevant to the code. In a brain, well, actually, no, you would say the energy is the chips, right? Well, you'd have to look at chip structure and the dynamics of I don't know, chip circuits and current and whatnot. In a brain, the energy is the code. Yeah, I don't know if I would make that stark of a distinction. All right, we aren't stopping because it's impossible. We are pausing to bury the... Okay, so we are done. We're done with this. All right. What to do now? So first thing I wanted to do was point out that we need to... Oh, why are we revisiting consciousness? Oh, I think that's what I just read. So what I wanted to do was embodied attention. Maybe both days. But I'm probably going to be streaming other days as well. What else do we need to go into? Okay. What is happening here? So we have a prologue. A prologue's got to pretty much just kind of recap what's going on, the mission that we're trying to do in part 2, the stuff we did in part 1, how that helps us out. We kind of have to consider the presuppositions of what we're getting at here, which is also a discussion of part 1. You know, why we're trying to identify and pursue our goals, what are we presupposing in that type of framing, etc. Why do we even care, right? We set up the necessary explanations to allow readers to become aware of the tools that that they could utilize for certain reasons. Okay, right. So we point out that what this part 2 is going to be doing in terms of, you know, giving a survey of many strategies, but also giving a, you know, a sense of why, a rationale behind these strategies. So we're still going to have to do a little bit of learning. Or like learning the underarching stuff. Ooh, okay. What else? Bridging part 1, part 2. Yeah. Note about okay, and then we got to talk about individuality. Once again, we got to reiterate that this is going to be something that anyone could use regardless, and that, you know, we're going to have all these tools here. It's not that you should use all of them or that you should use any of them, but if you want to, you know, more effectively pursue your goals, these are tools that you could use. Okay. Then the first major section after the prologue is the practical levers of agency. So this is like, so yeah, we also probably should, you know, make clear what we're going to be doing. Make the outline of part 2 clear. That might be the last thing we do, right? So, yeah, the first major I think we're getting 3 major sections in an epilogue. Is that the same thing I did in part 1? So we got 1, 2, 3. No, then we had Framework of Freedom, epilogue. And in this, oh no, no, okay. In part two, we have four as well, right? We got practical levers. Then we got identifying what to pursue. And then we got pursuing goals effectively. But then we also have managing, what I call managing trajectory. So this is like how to deal with all this stuff over time. And then we got an epilogue. So same structure, crazy enough. Practical levers of agency, though, this is before we can effectively set and pursue goals, we need to understand and manage the universal processes and conditions of the mind that enable and hinder our deliberate action. The thing that's come to my attention setting up this major section is that a lot of this stuff should really be in part one, as it concerns our attention and our conscious attention. Like, we should already be equipped with this idea that we should just be able to direct our attention in some sense through our reflective engagement, what we reflect on. That is both reflecting on things in front of us, but also reflecting on ideas, reflecting on things we could be doing, etc. And now this outline is antiquated significantly, but I've got, this is what I'm looking at right now. We got a whole section on deliberate reflection. This is a concept that we talked about in part one. This idea that we can deliberately reflect on things, right? So we need to just reiterate with our conscious grasp of attention. We might be changing these names up. Our conscious grasp of attention. So this is going to tell the story of how how do we want to go about this? This has to tell the story about the difference between our conscious experience, even of us doing something or putting our, directing our awareness or directing our engagements and our activities, what we're directing our intentions, etc. The difference between that and the attention at a more not neuroscientific level, but a psychological level, like what's going on with top-down and bottom-up attentional signals, and how our conscious direction actually affects all that other stuff that's going on. So that's kind of what we want to do with the scope of attention. That's at least what I'm thinking. But then also, this needs a new name. We need something like directing attention or whatnot. This is scope of attention. No, but this is leveraging attention. So I don't know what we're going to do. I'm not sure. Maybe this all just collapses into a single section. We'll see, because this doesn't make any sense to do all this, except for mindfulness here. We do want to actually have a thing about mindfulness, because we want to consider reflection, reflecting on there's two ways we could go about our reflection. We could talk about almost considering what is, and then also moving forward. So yeah, we'll have to figure out what's going on there. So it would be reflection, mindfulness, and then we'd have to consider what but this is going to be the next topic. We'll see. Leveraging attention, though, this is pretty clear, I think. The idea that we could frame our awareness in some sense, that it affects what we experience and what our body does, and where we end up going, and what we think that we're doing over time. We've got focus, this idea of keeping our attention on something and, following this framing idea. Now, what we could do is we could put focus, actually. Yeah, framing could be an active focus, so maybe we put focus up here. I'm not sure. I don't know what's going on here yet, but we're feeling it out. This idea of framing, and then we need to talk about the skills of attention. How we can... So this is all leveraging framing still, right? But this is how we could train our attention for specific reasons. You know, not only for paying attention for things, but also, you know, obviously creating habits of where attention goes and what we attend to. This is where we can talk about mindfulness at like in some length. We might want to do... Yeah, we might want to cut these up in a different way, where maybe like skills of attention could be a larger topic. Like the skills of attention should probably be like up here, and then we could go into a bunch of different skills of attention. Either that, or we just talk about skills of attention in an introductory way, and then we leverage them for a lot of things that are coming down the pipe. We'll see. Then we got to talk about biological conditions. These are the bottom-up constraints that dictate system stability. So this is where we go into all the things that are affecting our ability to do these conscious things that we're trying to do. So we've got like energy and motivation here. We got to talk about this idea of body budgeting, what's going on, just resource management. What resources cause what intuitively. All this is where we have to obviously talk about, you know, glucose and dopamine and serotonin and acetylcholine and you know, this is where we have to go into all that stuff. Rewards and drives might be the same section. I have just two sections here that might literally be stepping on each other's toes. I think it would be, is it possible to get a body budgeting section that doesn't include dopamine yet, and then once we get to rewards and drives, maybe we do a whole thing on dopamine. The problem is, like, we have, you know, there's a lot of things to talk about. So do we just put that all in body budgeting? Do we have a bunch of more sections? We've got this will versus the way subsection, which this could also be something that dissolves, but we need to look into these guys. We got to just, because this is a little more of a functional role of how the brain works. It's less of just looking at specific hormones or neuromodulators, and it's like, okay, different parts of the brain are specifically doing these functions as far as we can tell. And yeah, building energy and motivation. So this is like the practical, what we can do to build this energy. You know, what is sleep going to do for you, nutrition going to do, etc. How framing affects your baseline hormones. Yeah, all this stuff that we could talk about, combating laziness and procrastinate. We could just start talking about random stuff. I don't know how we're going to keep this structured, but then we get to the next section on emotion regulation, and we could do a bunch of stuff here. We can talk about emotional intelligence. So this is kind of like mindfulness of your own like emotions as they're happening. Mindfulness of your emotions, but also you can't just have this mindful understanding of your own emotions. You need to have some knowledge. You need to know something about these emotions. The story here is that both of getting knowledge in both of those camps really helps you out. We could talk about managing stress and anxiety. Huge one. Now this is tricky because we're not getting, this isn't like a holistic managing stress and anxiety in your life at the level of part 3. Like, actually, like we're not talking about this for the sake of making your life more emotionally rewarding. or less emotionally stressful, but specifically for in the moment, how you can manage your stress and anxiety, but also like how you can building a practice of emotional resilience. But this is also for the sake of the moment in some sense. Like this is for you being able to do the things you're trying to do. And then we could have additional emotional regulation strategies. Yeah, we could talk about a lot of stuff here. And this is where sleep comes up again, nutrition. It's tricky because like sleep and nutrition, things like exercise, that they deal with energy and motivation. They deal with emotional regulation, and they deal with cognitive function. So we have to figure out how we want to do that. But currently I just have it so that this next section, cognitive function, talks about all the ways that we can like improve cognitive function. And this can go into like each of these things as a separate topic. And really now we can start talking about all the things that they help out with. But without talking specifically about, how sleep just deals with stress and motivation. Like, there's a lot going on with what these things do. So it would be nice to give them their own space. But yeah, I think after that, then we go into the next major section. This is where I left off, of automatic behavior. This is where we can start going into concepts like biases. So that this is going to be, what we just did was the biological conditions. This is going to be a more functional look. So yeah, this is a more functional look at how the brain operates. One step up from biological constraints. So yeah, we could start talking about biases, social dynamics, habits, behavior and habits, etc. Yeah, I think this one is going to be more focused on how we can combat certain automatic behaviors or deal with them, notice them, and then deal with them, as opposed to building new ones. Building new ones is what we're going to do towards pursuing goals effectively. We got habit and routine. We got learning and acquiring skills. Like these are huge topics that we are going to talk about later on. But for now, we want to just be able to recognize the automatic behaviors that are guiding us. And then this is where we can talk. Actually, no, this is we do all that, and then we can have one last section here. Now, okay, so what is this? This is what do we have? Major section. Oh, this is not. This is a subset. Okay, subsection, section. Major section? Am I doing this incorrectly? This is a heading 1. In part 1, don't we just have... Yeah, okay, we start with heading 2. Is there even a heading 1 in part 1? Do I just skip over a heading 1? I do. I say I don't need a heading 1. Okay, no wonder. No wonder it just seemed like we had too much space with regards to our heading style. Now, this is going to take me a long time to fix this up. And that begs the question, should we just change it for part 1? But we shall see. I kind of like this being a section and then having this type of subsection. That said, maybe it... Well, it's nice to differentiate this, like all three of these. Like having a a section and then having a section be in the heading 1, like it's still just a bolded word. So okay, I'll have to deal with that. Yo, Stella Scarlet, welcome. W Content, keep it up. A follow back from you on Twitter would make my day. Well, now I'm starting to doubt the W Content compliment. All right. Okay, where do I want to go with that then? Do we just start watching stuff? Do we just not do it? No, we're only like 30 minutes in, so we need to do something here. What we could do is we could get a Yo, Onion Helmet, what's good? Would you like a Twitter follow? Yeah, what do we want to do? Onion Helmet, is there a topic that you'd want to dive into for any reason? Cuz I'm just in the weeds now of like organizing sections here. And so how do we do this? Okay. This can just be one. Oh, this is gonna be nice. This is gonna be really helpful, I think. Not really. I'm just chilling. All right. E.T. extraterrestrial. Very nice. Okay. Well, what do we want to look into? Should we just start on the mindfulness stuff? Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Deep research. How does framing affect a meditation practice? Even practices, okay, I should say, even practices that seem to not require any framing, such as mindfulness meditation, seem to still necessitate, rely on some conceptual instructions on what to pay attention for, or what one could possibly notice. Or how one can/should readjust once they notice their mind wandering. Okay, let's just run with that. See what it gives us here. We're gonna have to do this eventually, or at least get a sense of this. And I don't have much here yet, but that might be because it's like scattered around, or somewhere else. Okay. Search for the definition and role of framing and contextualization in. I don't know why. Oh, I shouldn't have actually done framing as a specific quote, because I think that's actually making it think that framing is some sort of concept that it doesn't need to be. All right. Oh, it's still going to go in that direction. Research the definition and psychological mechanisms of framing in the context of meditation and contemplative practices. Investigate the role of conceptual instructions in non-conceptual practices like mindfulness and vipassana, specifically focusing on the paradox of instruction or doing non-doing. Analyze how specific instructions regarding what to pay attention to, for example, breath sensations, act as a filter or priority setting for the practitioner's awareness. Explore the impact of readjustment instructions, for example, returning the breath non-judgmentally, on the user's emotional relationship with mind wandering and failure. Compare the effects of different interpretive frameworks, for example, secular therapeutic versus religious soteriological, on the phenomenological experience of the same meditation technique. Wow, that's pretty cool. Look for cognitive science or neuroscience studies on predictive coding or predictive processing, I didn't even ask for it, in meditation to understand how expectations set by instructions shape the sensory experience. Synthesize the findings to explain how framing constructs the boundaries of the practice, determining what counts as success, distraction, and insight. Let's just go with that. All right, and then on the other side, maybe I could look for a video or something that could be completely unrelated, but something that we could watch on stream. What do we have recently? I say a word a day for an entire year. Why zoning out is a hidden skill. Healthy Gamer JG.
What is a year?
No shot.
When I was younger, anything over a few minutes was inconceivable. Going somewhere in an hour might as well have meant tomorrow. These days, next weekend comes around before I've even finished processing last week. And my August is already fully booked at the start of the year. And a year sometimes feels like nothing at all.
I don't know if this is worth
I suppose this
50k
is
viewers.
Everyone
I'll give it the
laments
like.
that time speeds up as you
I'm
get
still the
older.
same.
And it's fair. Units of time are like the routes you regularly travel. By the 100th time you make the trip to work, or your partner's house, or the grocery store, you know what comes after every turn. And the journey feels so much shorter than when everything was new.
If someone says we're going somewhere for an hour, it might as well be tomorrow. Wasting my damn time. Yeah, we keep this the kid spirit throughout our entire life. Though, in all seriousness, I do obviously recognize what he's saying. Like, I feel like I could power through like an hour of whatever, you know, no matter how weird or how uncomfortable, like a plane ride or something like that. Like, I could power through that stuff. I think school kind of trains you on that one. But it could just be that we're getting older. It could just be, you know, it's less of our entire life. I'll watch a 2-hour Stan Richardson stream though. We're spending an entire lifetime on this stream. That's what's happening.
But is time really flying? Right now, I'm 26 years old. In just 4 years, I'll be 30. But how can I say that my 20s flew past if I can't remember what I did on June 15th, 2025? Today I went on a boat trip with my orchestra along the Rhine River while we're here at the German orchestra competition in Mainz. It's impossible to hold all the moments of your life all the time. Sure. But pick a random date 5 years ago and try to remember exactly what you did and felt. Chances are that it'll start feeling a lot further away. Like I was a completely different person at 20. Still me, only a different me. So then, since when have I been this me?
Honestly, he did a lot in a year. This is kind of an impressive year of activities. I raw dogged a played flight once. Listening to a Joe Rogan, doesn't that negate? Isn't that not raw dogging? I thought raw dogging was you literally sit down and you do nothing. I was half asleep and the plane got me feeling all turbulent. Oh man, that's always rough. You got to have your Dramamine ready to go. When I was younger, I used to just used to sit dead ass. Yeah, I mean, when you were younger, you just didn't you didn't know the opportunities of what you could do, but also when you're younger, I feel like everything's just so much more interesting. So like watching just a plane fly or seeing what's going on around you is pretty novel and neat.
18-year-old me was definitely someone else. But last February feels just as foreign to me sometimes. How much do the circumstances of my life need to change before I can consider?
So I think this is a really cool video, but the only thing I would give any like constructive feedback on or criticism is if he had put more forethought into the emotion of like how he would deliver a line over a sentence and put more emotion in each of the words, just so that it ends up coming across like a person that's telling you a story, where this is a very it seems very choppy, and you could do that. Like you could figure, I mean, what he really could do, honestly, what would be helpful to do is the day one, you film yourself saying the whole thing in the way that you would want to say it, and then you can always look back to that, and almost, this might even be killing the idea of this whole entire video though. You could emulate how you said it, or you could try to emulate the emotion. You don't have to think of it that way. You could think of it as like you are putting your own energy, your new energy, into this setup, this template. So it is a constraint, but it's also something that allows you to like express how you currently feel about that type of emotion. But
consider myself evolved, changed, something like that. Maybe I get to decide, because theoretically I am not the me who wrote this sentence. Nor am I the me who's uploading this video. And who knows who I'll be by the time you watch this. All these versions of me may look similar, but there's a new me in my skin every day. Each carrying a different set of experiences
facial hair
and a different outlook on life. Making decisions to the best of his abilities. It's hard to imagine this me making meaningful changes to my future. But 365 me's might just make a difference.
Is that it? Nice. Yeah, I do like thinking about myself over time as different people in some sense, where like you have to look out for yourself tomorrow. So obviously I don't want to just do something that's going to ruin myself tomorrow's day, unless I think that myself tomorrow would feel like it's fine if let's just say it was like a New Year's Eve party, and like I would probably feel, I'm trying to empathize with myself tomorrow, that I would probably feel like, okay, it was fine for me to have done that. So it's kind of a relationship with how I understand regret and what I can or should be doing, etc. The point about the podcast is that I could barely listen to it. Okay, so it was like a semi raw dog. It might have even been worse than a raw dog, depending on the podcast. Oh, what do we got? Oh my gosh, we got more Kiwis running. There we go.
Why are you running?
The audio was imposed for that whole part. I thought it was someone yelling at a kiwi, which is pretty funny. I just now have this idea that kiwis just don't like being seen by anyone. So they're like, whenever someone's filming a kiwi, they're always running away because they just don't want to be on camera or something. All right, what do we got? Dr. K?
Today we're going to talk about how to stop zoning out. And the basic mistake that most people make is they think of zoning out as a problem to be solved, which it's...
Okay. What do we got here? This is like focus. Dr. K. How to stop zoning out. Video. Share. Yep. There we go. Here we go.
sort of is and we're going to do. But there's one main thing you need to understand. Zoning out is your brain's way of trying to increase cognitive resources.
Okay, this is, you know, this goes right into this idea of the body budgeting idea, but zoning out is your body's way of increasing resources of
way of trying to increase cognitive resources.
Cognitive resources.
So if we look at zoning out, first thing is that everybody does it. And we do it when we are tired, when we are overwhelmed, when we are bored. So if I'm studying for a test and I feel cognitively fatigued and I take a break or I zone out for a little while, when I zone back in, I'm able to study. The problem, though, is that a lot of people get into this cycle of constantly zoning out, zoning back in a way that's really unproductive. And this is something that I really sort of dove into with a patient of mine who had ADHD that was getting worse. Now, this is something that sounds really common, but is actually very unusual because ADHD is one of the illnesses that should not really ever get worse. And I know that sounds weird, but let me explain. So ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means that it is a disorder related to the way that our brain develops. So if you look at the trajectory of ADHD over time, someone's brain develops in a particular way. They either have mild, moderate, or severe ADHD. And if anything, as we get older, ADHD should improve. About 1 in 5 people who are diagnosed with ADHD as kids will end up growing out of it as their brain matures as adults. But I had a patient who came into my office who said, my ADHD is getting worse over time. Yikes. Which doesn't make any sense because ADHD is a disease of how the brain is actually wired. And like we just said, it should be getting better. Now, there are things that can temporarily alter your ADHD if you don't sleep very well, if you just went through...
I like zoning out in the shower, feeling all Atlantic. What is Atlantic? Oh, this necessitates a story here. When I was in high school, I had one of like the scariest occurrences happen to me, where like the ocean, feeling all Atlantic. Like the ocean, nice. One day I woke up and I was in the shower and I was thinking like, okay, I mean, usually the shower is like the first thing I did every morning. And this is high school. So we're waking up really early in the morning and sometimes we're going to bed at like a normal time or a little bit late time. So, you know, I'm not getting the best sleep. So we're usually really tired in the morning, and I was thinking, okay, maybe chances are I forget what happened after I woke up and how I got to the shower. So I do my whole shower, and I get out, and I like open the door to my bedroom, and my light is off. And this freaked me out because I never would just like leave the light off, or I wouldn't turn the light off after I've like first turned it on. But then I check the time and it's midnight. I must have slept showered. I slept walked into the shower and then woke up in the shower. And that freaked me out. I was very scared after that. If I was teleported by an angel into the shower, I would think someone was playing a prank on me. Well, I didn't think it was, magic. I thought I did it, which goes to show that even back then I was skeptical of, deities moving me to a shower as if I was in The Sims. But yeah, that freaked me out. I actually, that was like a horror movie type of situation for me because I just did not expect, I just felt like I had lost some free will over my body at that point. And that didn't, that wasn't fun at all. But not the worst thing to happen to you. I don't know. I'm curious if I showered again when I woke up. I probably didn't because I probably felt like I was clean at that point. But all right, well, back to the video.
Break up or you're stressed out in some way. Sure, we can have temporarily fluctuations, but fundamentally ADHD is a diagnosis that should be relatively static or improve over time. And so as I started working with this person, we tried a couple of different things like increasing his medication. But even if increasing his medication allows him to focus today, it doesn't explain the trajectory of his attention span. And that's when we had to start thinking outside of the box. And we dug into this idea of zoning out. And by the way, if you guys want more of these out-of-the-box solutions, definitely check out the ADHD guide, which is basically like my exploration of things that work for patients that aren't a part of standard evidence-based treatment. So as I was trying to figure out what was going on with my patient, I stumbled into something called attention restoration theory. So
is that free for everyone? Do we have to pay for that? Get the guide. I want the guide, but I don't want the cookies. I have to pay $30 per module. I don't know about that. Full bundle, $120. So you get one bundle off. Okay, we don't need the trauma. I'll take ADHD. I'll take meditation. We don't need depression yet. We might want the anxiety right now. We need these three right now, I think. Total, we're saving money here? Oh, we did. And how much are we? Is this per month? Is this forever? Oh, wow. Yeah, this is it. Okay. So that's something to do maybe in the future. Just to learn more. $120. That's like a yearly WoW subscription. I mean, on one hand, it does seem a lot, but if it's not monthly, then I think that's like a significant education for not much money at all. Unlike Mr. Jordan Peterson over there. What is this, Jordan Peterson Academy? What is it? You're paying a ridiculous amount per month? Let's join. What is going on here? $800 per year. It can't be that good. So, I'll take the 120 flat forever.
I think a couple of Dr. Kaplan's who sort of made an interesting observation that when we go out into nature, we tend to zone out. So as they started to explore this idea of zoning out in nature, they discovered a couple of important things. The first is that when we zone out, it appears to restore some of our cognitive function. So
it restores part of our cognitive function.
When I'm studying for a test, like I said earlier, and I zone out, when I zone back in, I'm able to start working on the studying again. The second thing that they noticed is that when we zone out, we seem to be dealing with unresolved issues. So the more stuff I have inside me, the more likely I am to zone out. Now, y'all may have experienced this in a very negative way if you went through a breakup or something social is going on or you feel really hurt. You'll notice...
Marx was so right, man. Where are the Marxist therapists? True. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of... I don't know what kind of... boycott or protest it would be to just be a singular person who just believes so much in it that you would work for free. I don't know if that's how it would play out. I think that would also, that's probably like a slight misreading of it. It's not that you just want things to be free. It's all about the exploitation of labor. I think so doing something for free would even be just more you would be exploiting yourself even more so than otherwise. So I don't know if that's what people are really trying to do here. Do Marxist therapists not charge anyone if they're working class? That's a good question. Is the working class exploiting you at all? I don't know. I'm not sure how that works. I'm not sure what the logic's there. But I feel like if you were to, levy that argument, they would probably, say that you're probably operating in bad faith in some regard. You could argue that capitalism exploits ADHD because it charges extortionate rates. Yeah, perhaps. Depends what kind of insurance you have, really. But insurance is somewhat hard to come by. Or at least like pretty good insurance. I don't know. I mean, that's just out of my view. I just don't want to get a bunch of people upset.
That when you try to focus on a task, your brain will essentially zone out and you will start thinking about other stuff, right? Your brain will start trying to solve other problems. And that's how we discover what the role of zoning out is. It does these two fundamental things. And some aspects of attention restoration theory have basically been debunked, but subsequent research has basically shown us that these two elements are why we zone out. It is a way for our brain to cognitively recover some RAM. So you can kind of think about this like even a timeout in sports, right? So if I'm playing a game of basketball and I take a timeout, I need some time to catch my breath. And when I go back on the court, I'm able to play a little bit better. The second consistent finding is that when we zone out, we are usually dealing with internal and emotional stuff. And when I was working with my patient, this is the way that we approached zoning out. Not that it's a problem to be solved, but we tried to understand that, okay, when you zone out, your brain is trying to accomplish a couple of tasks. And the more that we focus on...
The brain is trying to accomplish a task.
Accomplishing those tasks outside of the way that your brain kind of does it, the better off you will be. Because essentially what starts...
There we go. That's the real takeaway. Takeaway. If you accomplish the task outside of zoning out, he just says you're better off. It's pretty ambiguous. I'm guessing then it will, I don't know, significantly reduce the amount of time. No, then it will reduce the impulse to zone out.
Starts to happen as we get into this cycle where we're trapped in zoning out. And the way that this works, it's a bit complicated, but this is essentially what we kind of stumbled into. So the first thing to understand is that your mind keeps track of all the tasks that you have to do. That is how it is able to remind you that you need to do something. Now, there's a basic problem here because the more things your mind is...
This could lend itself to the discussion of automatic behaviors as well. Similar to biases, like we could talk about zoning out as a thing that just kind of happens automatically and why. So maybe this should go to the discussion of automatic behaviors. Yo, Darmadon, what's good? We are ET chillin'. I'm good. Just had a nap. Got a mocha now. Hell yeah. That sounds great. Sounds wonderful.
keeping
We're learning about zoning out right now.
track of, the less cognitive RAM you have to actually solve a problem. And what was happening with my patient, and this may resonate with y'all, is let's say they were working on 5 tasks, one of which was a personal task, which they didn't even think of as a task that they were trying to solve. They had gone through a sort of a breakup, or they were on a break, they were on a separation. They'd been on a separation for about a month, and they were like not sure exactly what's happening in this relationship. They weren't sure if they should move on or they should wait or whatever. And so anytime they're sitting down for a particular task, let's say they're focusing on task number 1, their mind gets tired, right? Because it has all of this stuff in the subconscious, and then it switches to task number 2. But then our mind starts working on task number 2 for a little bit, and then it gets tired, and it switches to task number 3. And then as it starts working on task number 3, it gets tired, and it switches to task number 4. And then as they are moving between tasks, eventually thoughts about this separation that they're going through will always creep up. So they were sort of existing in this place where even if they spent an hour working, they didn't actually get anything done. And this is when we discovered a couple of very common principles that they had tried from the productivity, podcast circuit, actually seem to be sabotaging them. The first is people will say, just get started. And if you just get started, that's the most important thing. And the second thing that people will say is that, okay, you should just take small steps. Just take small steps, just take small steps, just take small steps. But what we actually found was that just getting started and just taking small steps ended up with them sort of taking a couple of steps over here, and then they'd get distracted, and a couple of steps over here, and then they'd get distracted. And
Okay. Just get started and just take short steps. Might be destructive when I'll say maladaptive. Is that how you use that word? Maladaptive? No, it's mal something. I don't know. Might be detrimental when when someone has unfinished business. The mind will want to resolve that. This will make it more difficult to focus on other topics. In other words, the mind will get tired more quickly on those other topics because of the unresolved one. It's taking resources, leeching resources. Okay. Does it get cold when it's winter in Australia? I've been thinking when my focus slips off of reading, then it's like a natural signal. I need my eyes off the page to process. Background processing. Yeah, and also like, what was it? Huberman always talks about how we can just like take a moment to pause, like 20 seconds to just like do a type of, meditation or yoga nidra to, give our mind time to internalize what it just read or what it just took in. So yeah, that might be a good strategy. Notice when your mind starts doing that. And now granted, once your mind starts doing that, you also have the opportunity to train it in some way by forcing it to stay on the page. And the question is like, what are we trying to actually train at this point? Here, coldest will be 5C to F. What are we looking at? 5C to F. 41. Okay, that's pretty good. I think our houses are built for heat or something, so could feel cold feels worse. Oh, I see. Well, then it might be similar in terms of how it feels. Cause where I'm at, it gets lower than that, but we're built for cold, so maybe it evens out.
And they would spend an hour trying to just get started, and they would get started again and again and again and do a tiny little thing again and again and again, and they would never get anything done. And there's research that backs this up, that when people multitask a lot, it turns out that the more experienced you are at multitasking, the less productive you actually are. So people who multitask a lot actually don't get much done at all.
Research, oh my gosh, research on the more experienced you are, actually I should say check research on. More experienced you are at multitasking, the less productive you are. Crazy.
So the solution for this ended up being targeting these underlying root causes, okay? So understanding that, okay, if my hands are full of things to do, I don't have actually working memory to get anything done. To understand that when I become cognitively fatigued from holding on to a lot of tasks, my mind has to switch more to restore my attention. And that underlying emotional things, personal things that require self-reflection will happen a lot when we zone out. So basically, the more self-reflection I need to do, the more my brain will zone out because I need to do a lot of self-reflection. So what we ended up with are a couple of unusual solutions that I've tried with several patients and I've used in my own life that work incredibly well. The first is, if you are stuck in a cycle of being trapped by zoning out, don't focus on getting started because your mind will just wander. Focus on task completion. Now, this may be really hard to do because we tend to zone out anyway, but that's why I want to explain this. So what we sort of find with people when I work with them is that this becomes like a set of dominoes where the first task that you complete is quite difficult. But the moment that you complete one task, the second task becomes easier, the third one becomes easier, the fourth one becomes easier, and then it actually becomes way, way easier to get all of your stuff done. Second thing related to that is, as best as possible, do not multitask, right? So we live in a society where like everyone is into multitasking, and I know a lot of y'all have jobs where you get interrupted and there are notifications. These things are everywhere that exist, and we're getting Slack notifications and emails and texts and whatever. But basically, we want to try to multitask as little as possible and focus on task completion. And the last thing that may sound a little bit counterintuitive is that if you want to be productive, you need to dedicate some time to being non-productive. To understand that the brain that is trying to complete your academic or your professional tasks is the same brain that is trying to solve your personal problems, trying to deal with the existential threat of AI, trying to deal with the dating and mating crisis. It's one brain that is trying to solve all of those problems. And what we tend to do in modern society is anytime we have a non-productive day, let's say I have a weekend, we don't give our brain the space to process those problems. We engage in highly distracting, highly absorbing, highly dopaminergic, highly emotionally activating, usually forms of media. We're on social media, we're playing games, we're watching shows, we're doing something to keep our mind occupied. And it's so interesting, right? Because the way we spend our weekends, we are rarely zoning out because we're so occupied. So you can circle back to what the Kaplans originally discovered and spend a day in nature. If y'all need more guidance or support, you can check out the ADHD guide.
Okay, if you want to be productive, you need to resolve personal salient issues, perhaps doing something that we usually deem unproductive, as long as it involves being away from stimuli, from excessive stimuli. Okay. A Marxist would say you can't solve this without first solving the problem of capitalism. Ooh, yes, that's actually a good point. You know, that would be a fair point, because this is the issue. If you want to be productive, you have to resolve these personal salient issues, perhaps doing something that we usually deem unproductive, as long as you're staying away from excessive stimuli. The issue is that a lot of people don't have time to do this. They never have the opportunity to just have some alone time where they can just meditate. You know, meditation is a luxury in this world. And yeah, so that wouldn't be the worst argument, right? It's that, you know, people are forced to spend significant amounts of time like focusing on things that they would rather not be, that also aren't helping them resolve the issues that they have when they're off work. So unless you eat, drink, buy books, go to the theaters or balls or the pub, unless you think, love, theorize, sing, paint, fence, etc., the more you will be able to save, and the greater will become your treasure, which neither moth nor rust will corrupt your capital. The less you are, the less you express your life. The more you are, the greater is your alienated life, and the greater is the saving of your alienated being. What was that from? Can recommend a former Burmese nuns channel. Absolutely.
Work with a coach if you don't know what internal stuff is in.
Okay. Beth Upton meditation. Here we go.
Interfering with your productivity, or see a licensed mental health professional.
All right, what are we looking for here? Noting practices in meditation. Let's get that one going. I'll do, actually this is 9 minutes, I don't know. Debating people, no. Rage and violence, no. Advice on 5. Mental purification. Whoa, what's going on there? Should we read on retreat? Consciousness and causality. Consciousness and causality. How do we know? Okay, caffeine, watching the breath. One thing for scientists to understand, facing challenging situations. Let's go for that. Old age, sickness, and death. Impercipient beings. I don't even know what that word means. Parts work. Why haven't the psychic powers have been filmed? Sunsets and delusions. Healthy versus unhealthy. Sense restraint. Yes. People in their roots do. Okay, need our gifts. Working with conflict. Noticing impermanence in daily life. What is pain? What to do if I have no wise friends? That's crazy. I gotta figure out what that one. I'm not saying that because I need it. I do have wise friends. Needs versus craving. Okay. Practicing while trying. Perfection. Coming into meditation, daily life. Joy. Why should I believe in past lives? How to avoid over-reliance on technique in meditation. That's what we're looking for. Overcoming fear. Practicing without a timer. The 4 stages of enlightenment. When things start stopping in Vipassana practice. When they start stopping. I'm intrigued. When the 3 characteristics merge. Overcoming delight. Core attachments. Wrong view. Pride. Practicing. Developing equanimity. Does this have an end? Or is this... Okay, this is going to keep going. So maybe I shouldn't just keep going. Maybe we'll do a popular switch. Ooh, okay, maybe we want that one. Okay. All right, here we go. If there's anything that interests you in here, she's very legit. And she can give good perspective on advanced Burma stuff. Yeah, I'd imagine I would want to come back here after doing like an initial survey in March of practices and then seeing what she says about that stuff. Noting practices in meditation. Oh, yeah. Oh, are we actually outside here? Ah, okay. It's the opening.
Could you speak?
Yo, Energy Domter, what's good? Happy Friday.
Speak about the pros and cons of Mahasi style noting. Yeah. So for anybody, I think most of us are familiar with this method by now, but just in case any of you don't know it, Mahasi style noting is sort of where we...
So she's not noting practices in meditation. She's talking about noting practices in meditation. Okay.
Note, we label our present experience. So we might hold the breath as an anchor, and you could note up and down, or in Mahasi typically the rising and falling of the abdomen. And then if something else comes in, like a thought, you might note it as being thinking. If you're going about your day, you might note it as seeing, hearing. When you're walking, they have a very specific method of like lifting and forward and placing. And so we're breaking down our experience into these different chunks that we can note. I think most of you have heard me suggest to some people sometimes to pick up a noting technique. It can be a really powerful way to calm the mind, especially if we're sort of dysregulated or full of wandering thought. We need to think about the intention with which we note. So noting something is not inherently wholesome or unwholesome. You can note something with love and acceptance and welcoming, but you can also note it with hate. So it's no good if you're sitting there noting, you're thinking. This isn't going to help your meditation at all. And so we need to emphasize the intention or the energy with which we note. Is it loving, warm, welcoming, friendly? Are we putting ourselves in good relationship with those objects? And then the other thing really to keep in mind with a noting technique is that it's a relatively coarse end practice because we're using our words. So when we're with noting, because we're with words, we are automatically necessarily with concept. And also because we're using our words, we're at the coarser end of the practice. Obviously, if you're noting with your thoughts, then you're not going to be completely free from thought. Your mind's not going to be in silence. So it's a tool to use at the more coarse, more basic end of the practice. And because the noting puts us necessarily with concept, technically we can't call any noting practice a Vipassana practice. We're not with ultimate reality when we are making a concept out of something. But that doesn't mean that we can't use it as a useful tool to help us calm our minds. Mind can only think about one thing at a time. So if we've chosen wise, directed, present thoughts, then it can cut out a lot of unskillful, dysregulated, wandering thought.
All right, that was actually like the perfect thing that we could open with, given that what we have here ready to go that we'll do after we watch more was specifically a discussion looking into how does framing affect meditation practice. Even practices that seem to not require any framing, such as mindfulness meditation, seem to still rely on some conceptual instructions on what to pay attention for, what one could possibly notice, or how one can/should readjust once they notice their mind wandering. So the first thing to point out is it's cool and interesting to hear her specifically separate this idea of being with concept and being in some complete Vipassana practice. That said, the level at which I'm trying to probe this is I'm trying to point out that even our Vipassana practice, even though we aren't looking for concept, right? We're not looking for words or anything like that. It's still relying on some prompt that might have been thought about prior to the practice, or perhaps if you're more practiced, you think about this thing without even realizing it before the practice and whatnot. So I want to get down to how pervasive is concept even in practices where it doesn't seem like any concept is coming up. But yeah, it's cool to hear that type of way of talking about it. Let's give likes here. All right, what do we have? It's some little meditation center in Spain. That's really cool. Yeah, labeling. Does your document discuss the transformative potential of religious ritual? If so, I have a recommendation related to that. What do you mean in terms of transformative potential of religious ritual? Transforming your life, transforming your current mood, transforming your state, your state of mind in the moment, transforming your understanding or the way that you feel about the world. Concepts. Unrelated question. Has anyone here played Deus Ex? I have not. I really should play the first game fully. I think I started it, but then I had stopped because I don't think I understood the game well enough. But I feel like now I've played games that are a little more, I've probably played more of a variety of games now where I probably won't be as off-put by the different nature of that game. And I'm also more comfortable probably just like modding if there's anything that I feel like I would like. I believe in their system, the conceptualization is taking place between the little chunks of sense experience we talked about another time. And that concepts are seen as not real. That's fair enough. Okay, so like there's we've got these, let's just say, you know, mini thoughts, or we could just say they're like subtle thoughts. They're unnoticeable thoughts. They're not that large. That are occurring constantly within our practice, regardless of whether we, you know, are really noticing that. And that allows us, that steers us in a direction such that when we notice our mind wandering, we're able to place it back in, you know, back on something that we're explicitly trying to pay attention for, which is conceptual, but it's also, you know, we're trying to just leverage that to point us in a direction, and then we can, you know, provided how deep our practice is, we can get to a point where we're just paying attention for you know, sense. I do have to say that one of the chapters that's coming in the Lisa Feldman Barrett book, I think does a more effective job than I did at pointing out how everyone's sense of sense data is quite different. There's a whole chapter on I don't know, everyone's mind is unique. I don't know, something like that. There are new two minds that I forget. It's something. There is no human mind, no one human mind. I'm not sure what the name was. All right, what is the theory of Rabbi of the nature of religious rule? What was the answer to the question, Energy Dompter? Or did you just have that ready to go? So if there are concepts involved, you're not investigated ultimate reality. Right, so my argument always is that there's always concepts involved. Like it's you know, obviously we're conceptualizing concepts here, but you can't run away from concepts completely, I think. And if you were to do that, like if you really were to get into a position where your mind is in that type of space, then you wouldn't notice anything. You couldn't notice anything. You couldn't even notice what that feeling's like. Like you would be in a state of just straight up, you're basically unconscious in that state. You've gone to a place where you've inhibited the, let's just say you've inhibited the default mode network so much so that you don't even notice anything. But once you notice something about that state that you were just in, you are now leveraging your conceptual understanding. Investigating, sorry, typos today. AI agrees with some quantifications that in Vipassana conceptualization take place between the little chunks of sense experience. It depends what sense experience means, though. Right, like that's the thing where I'm trying to really look. All right, to my understanding, he discusses the transformative nature of religious practices on one's character. Okay, so that I don't know if that's going to be in the scope of like what we're working on, honestly, in 2026. But once we get to part 3, we definitely have to look into that type of thing. You know, the idea of transformation of one's character. So what do we got? What was it? We could do that. We could quickly throw this into part 3. Okay. There we go. Qualifications, but anyway, I'm not trying to impose on you. They are theories, but I am just explaining Buddhist theory, right, which includes phenomenology, but perfectly valid to say they are constructing things or not seeing things clearly. I wouldn't go as far as saying like they're not seeing things clearly, because that, once again, that implies that you could possibly see things clearly as opposed to not seeing things clearly. I think it's just that you see things, and once you build a practice, you affect those things that you see. But you could say that you see certain bottom-up signals more clearly. Let's just say you've gotten your priors in line with the bottom-up signals that you would want to hear, that you would want to sense. But really, I think the idea of predictive processing is that you're really just affecting your priors, and that's affecting what you see. And while this is, in some direction where we can zoom out and say, the thing that you're noticing is in line with this, body sensory data. Like it really is just that you're training your priors towards that data, that sense data. But sense data is not something phenomenological. Sense data in this sense is like periphery sensory data or interoceptive data. But it's not felt. Like if we were to talk about sense data like that, but obviously that's not how they probably usually talk about sense data. I think it's just knowing what we know about the brain. It's inappropriate to say that by through these practices we are like seeing the data more clearly. It's just that we're able to notice that data more clearly. But yeah, it's tricky differentiation here. I just don't want the assumption or the inference that there is some ontological truth about this data, whatever that means. Because once again, this data is going to express itself differently for each person. Okay. I just bring that up to say they are reporting their experience too. That aspect would be a strange thing to question. And as I say, it can be constructed or whatever. Right. They are reporting their experience for sure. Oh, I accidentally hit that again. There we go. Okay. Mental purification. All right, it's usually like 10 seconds in, so we can always...
So this is a very huge question. The answer to that question is like the whole of the Dharma, the whole of the...
Oh, sorry.
How does the process of mental purification work?
Whoa.
So this is a very huge question. The answer to that question is like the whole of the Dharma, the whole of the teachings of the Buddha. So I'm going to narrow it because in the question we've got that word purification. So we've got this framework in the Dharma with this word purification. The Pali word is Visuddhi, which you will recognize from the Visuddhimagga, which is why the Visuddhimagga is translated as the path of purification. So Visuddhi there is purification. And the classic framework is Visuddhi coming in 3 stages, which we describe as being sequential, though in practice, in our lived experience, it's more complex than that. So the first...
Abstain from all unwholesome deeds, perform wholesome ones, purify your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Nice. That's a good good model to live by. Except for the idea of the ambiguity of what wholesome and unwholesome mean. But I'm sure that, obviously the Buddhists have, obviously they have more instruction on that. It's similar to like, other books where, they have kind of technical definitions, right, of what would be in that. And that, I think that's how you get a robust, framework, like a moral framework. You need precision on what would constitute these things. Unwholesome is like greed, hatred, ignorance. Wholesome leads to liberation. Yeah, the cool thing about this though is because Buddhism here is so grounded in phenomenology, it can leverage the ambiguity or it can exist with that ambiguity by still grounding in something that is intuitive and recognizable for a person. Like, regardless of what you're greedy of or what you hate, like regardless of what you hate, you can notice that feeling. Now that's difficult. You know, the question is that something that we can rely on though when someone hates someone in ways that are not obvious. You know, they might not believe they hate, but they're showing signs of hate. Same with ignorance is the hardest one, because it's like, how do you know? Everyone believes they're in the know, so how do you know what you're doing is ignorant, especially in such a way where it's going to lead to someone being uncomfortable, something that other people might describe as unwholesome. Wholesome leads to liberation, but probably more accurate definitions than that. Yeah, you can ground a morality in Buddhism with wholesome and unwholesome, but it is, I think, undercut by the two truths. Right, the two truths, though, they don't... I guess that's like the ultimate gauge, or not gauge, but that's the ultimate grounding of the fact that you're always going to be ignorant of some aspect of reality. So that's always nice to know. That points you towards, you might be wrong about what you believe or what you even notice about your own feelings. I heard a Tibetan monk say that many teachings like this that involve duality, the Buddha didn't really mean it. Oh, I see. Is this duality as in the duality of wholesome, like the dichotomy of wholesome, unwholesome, or duality of... just the idea that this is like being undercut by the two truths? Yeah, because we do have to operate on something that we understand. So this idea of wholesome and unwholesome can still be pretty effective gauges for people, as long as people are understand that the two truths has the authority. Like, that's the higher order thought here. But that is their angle, kind of, that the Buddha updated his teachings. Okay. Yeah, Buddha gave many teachings that are explicitly dualistic, like loving, kindness, meditation, right? And yeah, I think that's necessary. You can't just have it completely ambiguous with the, just a two truths reading. I mean, if it's supposed to be like a moral framework, or a holistic framework of sorts.
First one is Sila Visuddhi, which is the purification of our morality. And this is what we do when we keep the precepts, but it's also what we do when we tune into our hiri and our otapa. So when we listen to our conscience, we're engaged in Sila Visuddhi, the purification of our morality. And this really has mostly domain over our physical actions and our verbal actions. So it's the things that we are saying and doing. Are we causing harm to ourselves and harm to others? Are we using lots of defilements in our physical and verbal actions? Or are we engaging in wholesome states in our physical and verbal actions? And the second kind of Visuddhi is translated as Chitta Visuddhi, which is purification of mind, and it essentially means samadhi. So this is where we start purifying our mental actions to be without defilement for a long time. And in its purest form, that obviously means that we are entering jhana. So that's the middle section, Chitta Visuddhi, a type of purification. And then the third type of Visuddhi is Ditthi Visuddhi, which would translate as purification of view. And this is our Vipassana practice, where we go beyond concept, beyond the delusion that we're using to create concept, and we start to absorb in everything as being anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent, suffering, and non-self. So these are the three kinds of purification. And like I said, in the frameworks, it's really framed as like, do this one, then do this one, then do this one. Purify your morality, then develop samadhi, then practice vipassana. But what we actually see in people's lived experience of the practice is that, yeah, sure, we purify our morality some, we develop some concentration through doing that, we understand more the importance of developing our morality, that refines a little bit more, we start to understand more, albeit in a conceptual way, how things are impermanent, they're not really us, our concentration deepens somewhat, our morality improves a bit more. So it's much more fluid in practice. But there is some truth in that framework that the Sila Visuddhi is at the more coarse end of the spectrum of the work that we do to purify. The Samadhi is kind of in the middle, purifying our mental action, and then Vipassana is really the most refined end, where we're so refined that we're not even with concept. Any questions on that, Visuddhi, purification?
Can you say a bit more about the mental bit then? About, yeah.
What would you like to know about it?
One thing that's happening in Samadhi that you would describe as purification.
One thing?
That's called the 3 trainings. Morality, concentration, insight. Nice. Yeah, I'm going to have to really put a lot of effort in, probably around March more so, to start internalizing these, but I guess I could try right now. I need to know the scope. It's hard to like learn something if I don't like, is this one of many different teachings? Like, is it like, how many different things are there? How many different like numbered lists of things are there throughout this entire like, it really helps to understand the scope of what we're doing. Yeah, it's a big field, so so the question is, do I try to like get the whole field down, or do I just try to like sift through? Do I try to just find the things that I think are going to be most practical and beneficial to the document? Like, we're going to have to do a few days where we just do a survey. We just kind of, we just look into stuff. Maybe see where your practice leads you, right? But yeah, I'm not just doing this for my practice. I do have to do this for the sake of this document. Like, I'm trying to figure out what is actually the most important things that everyone should know in terms of these types of conceptualizations. And yeah.
So yeah, there's no unwholesome states arising, so that's very wholesome. How does the process of purification?
Well, we don't start off with no wholesome states arising. We start off with lots of unwholesome states arising. So we might purify our morality, and then we sit down to meditate, and we realize our mind is still doing lots of unwholesome actions. And so by practicing samatha, coming back to our meditation object again and again, that starts to purify. When we're well established in a deep access concentration, most of the unwholesome states have fallen away. And then the purification is to hold an increasingly subtle object. So the object becomes more subtle as the jhanas progress, and that means that we have to be even more balanced in our faculties, but also the unwholesome states have to be further away, basically. So if they're right on the doorstep of our attention, we're not going to be able to stay with that very subtle object. Does it answer your question?
I'll go for a second round.
Go on.
In a lay or like intuitive understanding of purification, it's like cleaning.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that aspect?
Mind can only know one thing at a time. So when it's with wholesome states, it's not with unwholesome states. And so if you think about cleaning, what we're really doing is changing habit. Our mind used to do this thing that we could say is dirty, it's a defilement, and now it's doing this thing which is wholesome. And we keep on doing that again and again. As we do it and the wholesome states gain momentum, we start to notice, but just by comparison, how unpleasant the unwholesome states are. And so the wholesome states start to snowball in a good direction, because we don't want to be with the unwholesome states anymore. Anything else?
That's good, thank you.
Great.
So it almost seems like you can't get this purification without the mindful practices, like without the actual concentration, focus, etc. Because you have to build those habits of thinking, and that requires attention, significant attention. I just say that because you might find a technique, teacher, tradition that you like their framing, and it becomes a window in. Okay, yep, true.
Anything else?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious which teacher or teaching would be most conducive to the story we've been discussing. I might just throw that. You know what? Maybe we could just throw the document in and see what it says. But we could save that type of fun for later. All right, watching the breath. Here we go. And
Ajahn Brahm, it doesn't matter where you watch. Ajahn Brahm says it doesn't matter where you watch the breath.
Burma, okay. This type of stuff. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
And it's enough to focus on the experience of the breath happening now. What's your opinion? Is it really important to focus on the area between the nose and the mouth for entering into the jhana? So, the direction of progress in meditation is from more coarse to more subtle. I think you've heard me describe this process many times. So we're going from more coarse mind states and also more coarse objects towards more subtle mind states and more subtle objects. And within that, there's a lot of variation in the breath. So we've got more coarse versions of the breath, maybe following the breath all the way up and all the way down. We've got more refined versions of the breath where there's less movement. And then we have very, very subtle versions of the breath where we're just knowing the breath directly with the mind. So where to focus on the breath really depends on where we are on that spectrum, how coarse our mind is, how subtle our mind is, how refined our attention is. And in general, a good rule of thumb is to focus on the breath in a way that feels comfortable. Not too coarse, not too subtle. If it feels comfortable, then your attention's going to want to stay there for a long time, and your concentration will build, and your practice will naturally refine over time by virtue of the fact that it feels good. And for most of the meditators, and there are some exceptions to this, but for most of the meditators, the breath is the most subtle here. And that's because here, there's the least going on with the body. If you focus on your breath in the abdomen or in the lungs, for example, you've got so much more body movement and body sensation going on that when your practice really becomes subtle, you don't want to know that anymore. You want to be with something more refined. So meditators can find it more difficult to completely let go of the body when they're focusing on the breath inside the body. But it's not impossible. Meditators also progress doing that, develop a nimitta maybe at their abdomen or in their chest. It's also possible. But for some meditators, it's more difficult. Sometimes if a meditator has really built up a lot of tension in the face, it can be a good idea to develop the practice somewhere else. Or obviously if someone's got like sinus problems or something like that, like an obvious mechanical problem with their breathing at the nose, it can be much more comfortable to focus somewhere else. But for the majority of meditators, the breath here is going to be the most subtle place to practice when our mind is refined and we want to deepen towards the jhana. Does it answer the question? Anything on this?
Yeah, I wonder if it benefits to focus on something like on the line of symmetry of your body. Like, you know, I'd imagine that maybe your earlobe would be pretty subtle. Like that's not it's not feeling too much, it's not moving too much, but then that requires you to choose a left or right earlobe, and that's maybe just too far away from this sense of center. But yeah, once again, we're also leveraging our sense of where center should be. Like we're leveraging some sort of physical directionality. But when there's a lot of terms, I don't know, it can help to have AI open and define them right. Yeah, we're going to have to do that for sure. I'm going to have to keep that ready to go. Also, at some point, I want to try, does Gemini give us this yet? No, we don't. I could use the microphone here. Yeah, I should start asking questions and talking to chat like this, because this is a more effective way than me typing it all out. That said, with ChatGPT, we can have a lot more fun, right? No? Yeah, we can. Hello.
Hey there. Feel free to dive in with whatever you'd like to chat about or ask, and we'll keep it nice and accurate.
Yeah, so like we can literally use voice mode for this, and that might be a more fun way to go about it. It might be also frowned upon that I'm just like talking to an AI, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe Google will get theirs in here at some point.
Great.
My concern with watching too many of these is that I might get too tired. Like it's very nice and calming. So I might say let's save some of these for like I might be streaming tomorrow or Sunday, so I'll save these for those days. For now, let's read this research here. But yeah, I feel like we should do a few of those like every once in a while. That's like a nice, I don't know, it's nice and calming, and it just like gets us into the mood of thinking about this stuff, and I don't know, I liked it. Thank you for the recommendation. We should actually, before we do that, what was the channel name, so I don't have to go back? So you know what, I'll put it on here. It was something Upton Beth. There we go. Nope. I haven't checked this feed in a while. I think I have to get rid of this channel, unfortunately. Oh, yes. Yes, we got more Gacked videos. This is the best. Just the best vibes. She's been on other people's podcasts as well. That's really cool. This is how we get hyped up for reading here. It's gotta be so fun to do these videos. Just constantly making music and filming your cats and dog. Nice. Just the best. Just the best vibes. All right, well, let's get into it. Let me lube up first. All right, here we go. The Architecture of Experience, a comprehensive analysis of instructional framing in contemplative practice. The myth of the unframed mind. The contemporary discourse surrounding meditation, particularly in its clinical and secular applications, often relies on a tacit assumption of framelessness. This assumption suggests that meditation is a process of stripping away conceptual overlays to reveal a raw, unmediated reality, a bare attention that exists prior to interpretation. All right. However, a rigorous synthesis of cognitive neuroscience, phenomenology, and clinical psychology suggests the inverse, that meditation is not the removal of frames, but the systematic installation of new, highly specific conceptual and attentional frames. So, you know, perhaps let's just be real careful that, let's just be clear here. I kind of did give this a direction. I do kind of bias this in some sense. I mean, granted, it's going to make research for us, but the question was, how does framing affect a meditation practice? Even practices that seem to not require any framing, such as mindfulness meditation, seem to still rely on some conceptual instructions. on what to pay attention for, what one could possibly notice, or how one can/should readjust once they notice their mind wandering. Now, one thing I want to pay attention to while we read this is this idea that she was bringing up between like coarse and subtle, I forget what it was, practices, coarse and subtle. I think it was just practices, or maybe thoughts, directions. Who makes the music? I think it's the creator of the channel. It's Gact himself. He's that good. So yeah, admittedly, this is kind of pre-biased towards my question there, my prompt. But I didn't give it so much as to say where it should get all these things, which I think is worthwhile here. So let's see what kind of evidence comes up here. I asked, does the idea that the most advanced meditation is non-conceptual have scientific support, and got a tentative yes. Okay. Yeah, let's see where it collides. Maybe we could even do that after we could read this, and then we can. I mean, chances are we're not going to finish this by today. Maybe we'll pick up next time. But then the next thing we could do is we could just do a non-research one and say, hey, I've got this idea and I've got this idea. So definitely, can you was this the exact thing you asked? Because let's run these both. All right. Because maybe there's a chance where this drops out, you know. The idea that non-conceptual meditation, often called non-dual awareness or open presence, represents the most advanced level of practice has significant, though still emerging, support in neuroscience. The idea that non-conceptual meditation represents the most... Wait, so that's a different thing, right? Oh, I see. Right. Yeah, I guess it thought you were asking. Yeah, I don't know how it got there from your question. Your question to me seems pretty clear. Did mine do that? Specific scientific nuance avoids ranking practices spiritually superior. The idea that non-conceptual represents a distinct expert level of functioning that is neurologically different. Yeah, but it took mine in the wrong direction as well. All right, so maybe we just have to be more clear. We could do that after we go through this. All right. The user's query posits a fundamental tension. Even practices designed to be non-conceptual, such as mindfulness or shikantaza, just sitting, rely on complex sets of implicit and explicit instructions. These instructions dictate what to attend to, how to interpret distractions, and what constitutes success. This report argues also like what constitutes being non-judgmental. So this report argues that these instructional frames are not merely pedagogical scaffolding to be discarded, but are the active mechanisms that shape the neuroplastic and phenomenological outcomes of the practice. All right, drawing on the framework of predictive processing, I didn't tell it to do that, but active inference in the phenomenological matrix of mindfulness, this analysis demonstrates that framing acts as a set of high-level Bayesian priors. Is that how to pronounce this? Or do people go crazy with this? I should know this. It's just Bayesian. Okay, I've looked this up like 5 times and then I keep doubting myself. These priors modulate the precision weighting of sensory inputs. So precision weighting here, this is like, imagine your top-down priors are affecting your like baseline of what you're even looking for, and then bottom-up signals are essentially guiding your top-down priors to the place it needs to go. So towards the bottom-up signals, but it's still the anchor that's being moved is the top-down signals. And, you know, this is a metaphor, but yeah, it's not that the bottom-up signals are being interpreted or the bottom-up signals are being filtered. It's that I think through a strict predictive processing interpretation, it's the top-down priors that are really affecting what you notice explicitly and and subtly or unconsciously or subconsciously. These priors modulate the precision weighting of sensory inputs, determining whether a sensation is experienced as pain or intensity, whether a thought is me or a mental event, and whether the self is an agent or a witness. By manipulating these priors through language, metaphor, and cultural context, meditation instructions literally reconstruct the architecture of the practitioner's conscious experience. The following sections provide an exhaustive examination of these dynamics, moving from the neural micro-mechanisms of predictive coding to the micro-sociological effects of secular versus religious framing. Okay. Theoretical foundations, the neurocomputational mechanics of framing. To understand how a verbal instruction can alter the subjective texture of reality, we must ground our analysis in a robust theory of brain function. The most potent explanatory framework currently available for contemplative science is predictive processing, often elaborated as active inference. So the brain is a predictive machine. We always feel like we've read this like 5 times. Traditional models of perception viewed the brain as a passive receiver of sensory data, processing inputs from the bottom up to build a picture of the world. The predictive processing model, championed by neuroscientists like Carl Friston, flips this model. It posits that the brain is a generative engine that constantly projects top-down predictions, priors about the sources of sensory input. Perception, in this view, is a controlled hallucination constrained by sensory data. So the sensory data is going to affect that hallucination significantly. In this architecture, the brain seeks to minimize prediction error or surprise, the discrepancy between its expectation and the actual input. It can do this in 2 ways. Perceptual inference, updating internal models to match the input. For example, realizing the shape in the dark is a coat, not a bear. Or active inference, acting on the world to change the input to match the prediction. For example, turning on the light to resolve the uncertainty. So, and this active inference idea takes like precedence in like the view of embodied cognition. Like they're all about this thing really, like even our perceptual inference is happening through a lens of active inference in some sense. You know, our learning is an acting in some sense on the world, and that points out that like it's not just like you're learning some non-embodied conceptual knowledge. It's that you're learning like embodied knowledge. You're internalizing these signals that are being these pervasive signals in your body that are happening while you're experiencing this event. Your memory is affected by signals of experiences you've had in the past, etc. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so was this a first of all, is this a was this just shared or is this a collaborative? Because I think they do collab chats now, which is crazy. I don't know how that even works. Does Buddhist theory that meditation becomes non-conceptual have scientific support? All right, let's read this to prime us here. I just shared it. Okay. Yeah, I'm curious how that works. Like, do I see it live as someone else puts their prompt in, and then how does it adjudicate who's asking what? Okay, in Buddhist theory, the progression from conceptual to non-conceptual meditation is a central pillar of practice. Scientific support for this transition is an active area of research in neuroscience and psychology, though support often comes in the form of identifying neural correlates for these subjective states. While science cannot yet prove the metaphysical claims of Buddhism, Empirical data suggests that advanced meditation does indeed lead to a unique state of consciousness that functions differently than our typical conceptual thinking mind. Right. So this is all in line with our understanding here. The idea that, we could point out the huge example that the default mode network is significantly diminished in some sense. So that is a significantly unique state of consciousness than our typical conceptual thinking mind, in which, thoughts that arise would be very much more muted or, more few and in between, you could say. The question is, once those thoughts arise, once those thoughts manifest in any capacity, in any determinate capacity, so any time that you grasp anything with words, that you are still leveraging that same region of the brain, that same default mode network, and whatever information it's giving you about your state of consciousness right now is already through the lens of culture and contingency. That's the strictness of that view. But let's continue. The Buddhist theory, conceptual versus non-conceptual. In many Buddhist traditions, especially Yogacara and Dzogchen, meditation begins with concepts using visualizations, breath counting, or mantras. Eventually, these scaffolds are dropped to reach a state of direct perception where the mind is aware but not filtering experience through labels, categories, or language. Scientific evidence for the transition. Research into non-dual awareness and open monitoring provides the most direct scientific parallels to non-conceptual states. Deactivation of the default mode network. The DMN is the brain network associated with self-referential narrative thought. The inner monologue. Studies on advanced meditators show that in deep meditation, the DMN is significantly inhibited. This correlates with the subjective report of dropping the story or reaching a non-conceptual state. Gamma band oscillations. Highly experienced meditators exhibit high amplitude gamma wave activity. Gamma waves are associated with binding, the process by which the brain integrates different pieces of information into a single unified experience. Some researchers suggest this represents a global awareness that isn't fragmented by conceptual labels. Okay. I'm curious why why simply the phenomenon of binding would lead to this type of takeaway. Can you further explain how increased how high amplitude gamma wave activity could be perceived, interpreted as a global awareness that isn't fragmented by conceptual labels? For reference, I understand the functional lens of the global neuronal workspace theory. Okay. That'll allow it to just connect this to something I already understand. All right. Topographic reorganization. Recent studies suggest that advanced meditation reorganizes how the brain processes the self versus the environment. So this is another thing that I would be totally open to intuitively. Granted, I mean, obviously I'm open to anything here, but this is something that is very, very much resonates with what we know about the type of changes that can happen. It's not that you just change factual information about your self-identity. You change how you holistically experience these concepts, which is why I try in part one to make concept be a holistic, embodied thing. It's not just the factual information we know about a pen. It's how you it's a very much phenomenologically grounded sense of how we experience the pen, how like what is happening here. And that obviously lends itself to that embodied cognition simulation type of view, where when we think about a pen or we see a pen, different parts of our brain are being activated that correspond to motor movements and emotions, etc. All right. In non-conceptual states, the brain shows decreased connectivity in areas that distinguish between me and not me, supporting the Buddhist claim of a non-dual, non-labeled experience. We got the cessation and EEG evidence. Utilize EEG to examine cessations, states where awareness of the self and the world completely drops away. These events are marked by a massive decrease in alpha power in the occipital and parietal regions, areas involved in visual processing and spatial awareness. Okay. So this provides objective evidence that meditators can voluntarily enter states where the brain turns off its typical conceptual and sensory processing hierarchies while remaining in a unique state of biological wakefulness. So yeah, even through the type of framing that I've been saying, where I still think some level of conceptual understanding is being leveraged when we interpret these states, they would be very much different than our normal states of like thinking about things. Like this is a case where the experience is completely different in like a non-intuitive way, a way where I couldn't even intuit it right now. I can't empathize with what this state feels like because I've never been to this state. That said, the idea is that to reduce that state into words, or to say that it's true in some sense, would be inappropriate just based on like our fundamental view of how the brain generates some conscious experience. Cessation is the highest state of Theravada, nirvana. Nirvana has different meanings, but in Theravada, that state is one of the meanings. Okay. So this is pointing out that people can, just willfully bring themselves to that state of cessation. That's pretty cool. That's a very useful skill. All right, key scientific challenges. While there is support for the existence of these states, two major hurdles remain. The measurement problem. Science relies on third-person data scans, while meditation is first-person experience. A scan can show that your brain stopped talking to itself, but it can't strictly prove that the experience was non-conceptual in the way a monk defines it. Right. Categorization. Psychologists often debate whether non-conceptual means a complete lack of concepts or simply a state where we aren't attached to them. And even that's a little ambiguous, like what it means to be attached to a concept. You'd have to point out the specific parts of like the processes that you would say are like contribute to a feeling of attachment. Summary of scientific support. We got dropping the self, direct perception, non-conceptual state, DMN activation. Okay, and then I want to just figure this one out. Just for my own understanding here. This is a fascinating intersection of neurophysiology and phenomenology. You are spotting a seeming paradox in the global neuronal workspace theory. So the standard theory, gamma synchrony, acts as ignition. It binds disparate features into a specific coherent concept or object that is then broadcast to the global workspace. This is slightly wrong here, or this is slightly like inappropriate way to say this. It's not that this, it binds these features into the broadcast is the thing bound together. The binding is all these disparate features being contributed by different parts of the brain. That's the whole point of the global workspace, to connect this information in some sense. And the feeling that we have is simply an accumulation or an amalgamation of all of these parts of the brain firing off in tandem. Okay, the paradox. If advanced meditators show massive gamma synchrony, shouldn't they be experiencing hyperconceptualization? So no, this wouldn't be an assumption you would get. It's just that this would be you would expect. So okay, let me try to intuitively see how it would make sense without going into this. Like if there's significant synchrony, is that the word here we're using? If there's significant synchrony, then there's not going to be a lot of competing signals that might affect a lot of other processes, such as salience and emotion. So when you're in these synchronous states, you would expect that significantly less about your experience would be noticeably chaotic. If there's a lot of if it's out of sync, then you have like different parts of your brain that's trying to yell out, hey, we got to do this thing, and then other parts are trying to respond to that. Like that would be a state conducive to a raise in heart rate and a lot of thoughts being flung at you. When you are dealt with like uncertainty or chaos in general, your brain has to come up with solutions to that problem. And not only do you have to does the brain have to come up with those solutions? Because you can imagine that the default mode network is constantly coming up with those solutions. You can't inhibit the default mode network. You have to listen to what it's trying to say. And when I say you, I mean different parts of the brain need to hear this information, because this is the information that will allow these other parts to regulate what they need to regulate. Like this is important information it needs to hear. So when the brain is out of sync, everyone needs to be listening, everyone needs to be ready to go, and they're going to be doing a lot of stuff in response to that. But this high synchrony state you'd expect would involve everyone's on the same page about information, and that can lead to, hey, we're fine. We're in a state of being fine. So then you can lower the heart rate. You can get into this really relaxed state because there's no threat here. There's no reason for us to mobilize in any way. And yes, that would significantly affect the way that you feel your experience. Absolutely. For reference, I understand the functional lens of the global neuronal workspace theory. It makes sense that synchrony would result in a more peaceful state, as if disparate parts of the brain are all in agreement on the global signal. No one has to sound any alarms, and no one really cares to hear what the default mode network has to say. That said, conceptual labels seems to be... So maybe that answers the question. If you don't have the default mode network flying off, then maybe you don't have to leverage the other parts of the brain. So yeah, that said, conceptual seems to be more of a holistic linguistic processing effort than merely the DMN. But perhaps if the DMN is significantly inhibited, then you don't, then the brain doesn't need to, or pragmatically speaking, doesn't. Simply doesn't doesn't need to activate / simulate parts of the brain, the other parts of the brain that contribute to our experience of concepts, whether that is motor movements of the tongue or motor movements of the body, affective simulation, actually interoceptive simulation, affective experience, etc. All right, let's let that one ride. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a lot here. The gamma stuff is crazy. Can't they jump at 800% or something from compassion meditation? That's crazy. Apparently some monks are hesitant to get scanned because they then it might speak to which tradition is more accurate. Oh my gosh. Can I ask, you are a mereological nihilist, right? Are you asking me? Am I a mereological nihilist? What is a mereological? What is? I mean, I don't like putting labels on me, but let's see if this is a fine enough label. Seems like similar logic to why concepts might not be innate. Objects are just atoms. Vision is just finite number of stimulated cells in the back of the eye or whatever. Sam talks of experiencing things as data, right? Sam, though, I don't know if Sam Harris is on this predictive processing wave, so he might be slightly wrong in the way that he usually characterizes the data as something experienced. But I don't understand. You know, I shouldn't jump the gun there because like he is a neuroscientist, right? Like Sam is literally like a trained neuroscientist. So I don't want to simplify his view on this type of thing. But I don't think that framing would be granular enough. But yeah, a mereological nihilist is a philosopher who believes that composite objects do not exist. So I don't know. I wouldn't go in this direction. Yeah, I don't know what to go. Like, I don't know how I would deal with this type of thing. I mean, I think that, you know, all that exists as far, you know, when characterizing what we experience, I think concepts exist, and that's what I'm using to characterize all that we experience. It's like meaning exists. That's how you know, broad I want to be in regard to that. But I point out that all of this meaning is a response or a manifestation of processes in the brain. But once we get to concepts, then we have to understand that there's no rule set to ontology, the concepts we experience. Like I think it would be inappropriate to make a case like this, to make some absolute rule set. When we talk about conceptualizing our experience or conceptualizing our understanding, we point out that what we're doing is just conceptualizing. We're just saying that this is a way we can think about this stuff that we experience. We're making sense of the you know, the categories and the singulars and the universals that we experience. I'm not trying to make an argument that there isn't or is one type of object and not the other, because objects and parts, these are just concepts that we have. We have concepts about what an object is, what a part is, and the only thing that I point out though is that it seems to be the case that when we have like universals or composite objects, these are deeply connected or related to these the notion of like a particular about an object. So, you know, like I can't disconnect the thing that I think I'm holding right now and the category of pen itself. That isn't to say that one of those exists and doesn't exist. They both exist as far as I experience them. So, shout out to the greatest philosophical mind of the 21st century. Okay, and then we got a nice deleted message. Hell yeah. Simples arrange XYs. Why would anyone believe this? While it seems counterintuitive to deny that the existence of everyday objects we see, mereological nihilists rely on a strict logic to solve difficult philosophical paradoxes. So yeah, the idea of strict logic scares the hell out of me, first of all. All right. The problem of vagueness. It is notoriously difficult to define exactly when a collection of parts becomes a new object. Exactly. It's very difficult to understand the bounds of our concepts. But the point is that we have all concepts, even the ones that feel the most determinate, like this pen in front of me, have shifting bounds as we learn new things about them subtly. You know, when I say that they have shifting bounds, I'm not saying like there is a space in my brain where like this thing is like shifting bounds. I'm saying like the way that we think about it can be that like we can think about it as having shifting bounds, because as we learn new things about this pen, and when I say, I mean that in the most fundamental way, where I look at this thing and I've already learned something about it, even though I don't understand that I've learned something about it. My brain is changing. You know, the state space is changing in such a way that it's going to affect how I experience the world in the next moment. All right, what do we got here? A video for later.
Monday.com.
Whoa. And yeah, this might have to be later, because I'm probably gonna want to stop soon. Maybe we can start reading the longer. Uh-oh, someone's getting got. I know my fate. Yikes. Is this something he said? Was this a penguin? Do we get a penguin view? No, it's a person. It's unfortunate. All right. All right, this is sophisticated insight. You have accurately identified a tension in the literature. If gamma waves are the mechanism of binding, putting parts together into a whole, why doesn't that just result in stronger concepts? That's not what I'm suggesting either. How is this thing missing the point here? I don't know. I probably just missed something. The answer likely lies in what is being bound, and crucially, what is being excluded from that binding. You are correct that conceptual labels are not just the DMN's narrative. They are a holistic whole brain simulation involving motor planning, linguistic categorization, and affective prediction, embodied cognition. Hell yeah. Here is the technical breakdown of how high amplitude gamma can create a global but non-conceptual state viewed through the lens of global neuronal workspace theory and predictive processing. All right, perceptual binding versus semantic binding. In standard global neuronal workspace, ignition usually involves two distinct types of binding happening simultaneously. We got perceptual binding, bottom up, binding redness plus roundness to the visual object. Semantic binding, top down, binding visual object, apple label, edible, motor affordance, concept, right. In the non-conceptual state, the hypothesis is that high amplitude gamma represents a hyper-binding of the perceptual field, type 1, while simultaneously decoupling from the semantic linguistic network, type 2. The brain enters a state of high local and long-range synchrony between sensory cortices and the global workspace hubs, but the links to the semantic memory banks and linguistic centers are functionally inhibited. You experience the red, round, shining presence with extreme vividness because the sensory data is globally available. But the circuit that usually screams apple is silent. You have the coherence of the whole without the fragmentation of the category. So the empty ignition hypothesis in global neuronal workspace theory, consciousness is often described as a broadcast. Usually we broadcast a specific message. In advanced meditation, high amplitude gamma may represent a standing wave of empty ignition. Okay, imagine a radio station. Usually the signal rides on the carrier wave. In non-conceptual states, the carrier wave is amplified to maximum power, but the signal is dropped. The global workspace is ignited. The system is fully awake, integrated, and responsive, but it is not collapsing into a specific attractor state of a concept. It is a broadcast capacity rather than content. This aligns with the phenomenology report of pure awareness or awareness of awareness. Shutting down the predictive machine. Your point about the brain pragmatically not simulating is best explained by predictive processing. The brain is a prediction machine. It constantly projects top-down concepts to explain bottom-up sensory noise. We don't actually see the world. We see our predictions of it. A concept is essentially a top-down prediction that successfully suppresses the sensory error. Meditation involves systematically reducing the weight of top-down predictions and increasing the precision weighting of the bottom-up sensory signal. High gamma is often associated with prediction error, the raw, unpredicted signal moving up the hierarchy. By sustaining high gamma without letting it collapse into a low frequency prediction, actually this is really important, it's often associated with prediction error, the raw, unpredicted signal moving up the hierarchy. By sustaining high gamma without letting it collapse into a low frequency prediction, the meditator stays in the raw data stream. They are surfing the error signal rather than solving it with a concept. So okay, here's the response to this, because this is pretty interesting. Okay, a few things to note. If I recall correctly, do I not get the voice thing here? I can't do voice midway through. That's a bummer. If I recall correctly, a strict predictive processing reading would say that if there was no prediction error, then there would be no conscious experience at all. Now, this is quite intuitive and resonates with what is reported about these states. The question, though, is whether the top-down signaling and the subsequent prediction error is necessary for a feeling about what type of experience one is having. This is especially pronounced once someone puts that feeling into words, such as having a more real experience. More real or clear experience. That's the type of angle I would take this, because like I think all this stuff is fine, and it would make sense why people get in this state of you know, like almost being asleep in some sense, like they're almost offline in these states. It's very peaceful. Oh wait, I didn't even read this. Nietzsche took on a similar project to you, trying to overcome the nihilistic tendency in modernity. Interesting video. Nice. Okay, yeah, we definitely want to read that or watch that. Free my mans. Get down. They gotcha. They got your mans. All right. So, but let's not run away yet. You mentioned that concepts involve motor/interoceptive simulation. This is the embodied cognition view. A hammer isn't just a word, blah, blah, blah. Is the brain planning to grasp and hit? Deep meditative absorption often involves profound physiological stillness. If concepts are partly motor plan... Okay, we already figured this one out, that regardless, there's inhibition that gets in the way of the actual motor movements or the muscular mobilization. But that's also happening when we think about kicking normally. I don't actually have to kick my muscles when I think of kicking, but the studies have shown that the parts of the brain that would be activated as a response to my muscles kicking are already already firing, like as if they're preparing me for that motor action. All right, this is a crucial distinction that touches on the hard problem of consciousness within the framework of predictive processing. Okay. You are absolutely right to challenge this strict reading. If we define consciousness solely as error correction, then a perfectly predicted world should effectively disappear, the darkroom problem. Here's how we can resolve that paradox and address whether top-down signaling is necessary for the feeling of reality and its subsequent description. Do I disappear? Suggest that if the brain minimizes all prediction errors, it enters a state of automaticity, unconscious habit. So how can a meditator have no conceptual predictions but heightened awareness? The answer lies in precision weighting. We usually minimize error by changing our predictions top down. We use concepts to explain away the sensory noise. Once explained, the sensory data is discarded. Instead of explaining the error away, the meditator increases the precision weighting of the sensory signal. The brain says, treat this bottom-up data as extremely important and reliable, even if it doesn't fit a pattern. Nice. You are not reducing the error to zero by solving it with a concept. Instead, you are sustaining the error signal and refusing to let a top-down concept collapse it. Okay. In this view, consciousness isn't just error correction. It corresponds to the precision of the signal. A high precision signal creates a hyper vivid experience, even and especially if no top-down concept suppresses it. Okay, this is cool to know, because that also makes sense of the that interpretation of predictive processing, which I was a little iffy about. Is top-down signaling necessary for the feeling of reality? We must distinguish between semantic predictions, concepts, and structural predictions, priors about space-time. So semantic top-downs, this is a chair not necessary for qualia. Research suggests we can strip away the semantic label, the whatness, and still retain the thatness, the sheer existence. The feeling of realness does not come from the label real. It comes from the resistance of the data to being predicted away. The harder the data hits without being dampened by a prediction, the realer it feels. Okay. Structural top-down the frame. There is a 3D space. Time is passing, likely necessary for structure. Even in deep, non-conceptual states, some very deep, archaic priors, likely from the brainstem or tectum, remain active to maintain a basic sense of spatial location or wakefulness. If all top-down predictions ceased, one might enter a seizure or a coma. The non-conceptual state strips the cortical concepts, but not necessarily the structural priors of the organism. Okay, so there's a few things a few directions we could go in here. So is one issue the ambiguity about the scope of what a concept is? For example, whether it is simply the linguistic aspect, or if it's the entire embodied aspect, including affect and other feelings. Structural priors, right, of the organism. Reality is the absence of simulation. Why does the user report the experience as more real? In standard consciousness, we live in a controlled hallucination. We are mostly perceiving our own top-down simulation with just enough sensory data to keep it on track. We are seeing our memory of the world, not the world itself. The inversion, when you inhibit the DMN and top-down semantic networks, the simulation stops. You are suddenly forced to process the actual high bandwidth sensory stream. Is the case that we need to be precise about what real means. For example, if we define real as a clarity of bottom-up signals, then it would be accurate to say that these states give you a clearer sense of what is real. If we define real as some absolute ontological truth, then we might run into some issues. For example, the possibility that people experience these bottom-up signals differently, and this becomes even more difficult because people will end up interpreting these signals differently, given that this interpretation relies on more from top-down semantic / associative networks. All right, am I doing this conversation justice here? I'm trying to navigate all the different options we could, places we could go. The feeling, this feels more real because biologically speaking it is. You are processing more bits of external data per second than you ever do in normal waking life. The feeling is the subjective correlate of high informational throughput. So the way I guess I'm reading that is like, usually the top-down priors and the fact that you're giving them so much weight, it's getting in the way of taking in more bottom-up information. And if you have the top-down stuff inhibited, then you're getting significantly more bottom-up information without any necessary deployment of your affective systems or your salient systems and all the stuff that would usually deal with resolving prediction error. The linguistic paradox, it was ineffable. You pointed out the issue of putting this into words. If the state is non-conceptual, how do we later say it was clear? This is where the global neuronal workspace theory and episodic memory interact. The state, time t, high gamma, high precision, low top down. The workspace is flooded with sensory content. No linguistic tags are applied in the moment. The encoding, the hippocampus encodes this event. Crucially, it encodes the metadata of the system state. It records high arousal, high prediction, and low prediction error. Smoothness. The recall, time +1. The meditator returns to normal consciousness. The DMN reactivates. The translation, the DMN looks at the memory trace. It sees a massive spike in signal fidelity and a lack of noise. The linguistic center searches for the closest available tag to describe high fidelity, low noise. So this is pointing out that it's not necessary for linguistic tagging to be applied in the moment. So even the way I described this earlier today was probably inappropriate or wrong in some sense for the top meditator. Like for a non-top meditator, I'd imagine that still the DMN does have its way every once in a while, throws a little something in there. Also, to be clear, how inhibited is the DMN for the top meditators? Is anything getting through during T? Time T? During time T? Like that's kind of also what I'm curious about. But yeah, I mean, this checks out. Let's just say none is getting through, then this checks out, and So it doesn't require any tagging during game day, but still there's being stuff converted to memory such that afterwards, if you're trying to make sense of that memory, you would then use obviously tagging at that point, which you could say alters the memory itself. That's what. And on the topic of memory, what is there to say about the possibility of the memory being altered or associated with semantic information during recall time t+1 being immediately such that any t plus 2 ... is then linguistically / semantically enriched. That's a possibility. I don't know how that. I mean, I think that is what happens. I just don't know what that would mean for it. I don't know if that actually assaults the the confidence someone has in this answer. That said, I wouldn't say that necessarily assaults the honest t+1 answer. The honest initial. Okay. These words are post hoc compressions. They are not the experience. They are the receipt for the experience. The feeling about the experience happens after the fact or in parallel via a separate monitoring circuit, but the quality of the experience, phenomenality, is intrinsic to the high precision state itself. So strictly speaking, top-down semantic signaling is not necessary for the phenomenological feeling of clarity. In fact, its absence is likely exactly why the experience feels so shockingly real, because the filter has been removed. Now, of course, it would be difficult to distinguish between the immediate t+1 and t+2. Okay. Lastly, in a more philosophical direction, could we say that no, I'll be more, even if there was no I should say in a more linguistic pragmatism philosophical direction, even if there was no tagging during T, and t+1 was a high fidelity response to the memory of T, there's still the discussion of whether that that feeling of realness is there's still some discussion of whether justifies the category of realness slash clarity. You know what, I should say of ontological realness slash clarity slash transcendence. Given that these experiences are still manifestations of individuals' unique brains, bodies, okay. I think that was an effective way for me to think through this topic, and then I gotta get out of here. But I'm glad I started the stream early so that we could go extra long. All right, you have hit on the exact friction points where neuroscience, phenomenology, and epistemology grind against each other. The short answer to your intuition is yes. The ambiguity of concept, the definition of real, and the reliability of memory are the precise levers that skeptics and constructivists use to analyze these states. Here's a breakdown of these 4 critical issues. The scope of concept, words versus embodied predictions. You're correct that the debate often collapses because people talk past each other regarding what a concept is. The narrow view, linguistic, if a concept is just an inner monologue or a specific word like apple, then it is easy to see how one could suppress it and have a non-conceptual experience. The broad view, embodied slash predictive, if a concept is, as predictive processing suggests, a holistic body-wide prior, a schema that predicts sensory input, prepares motor responses, and regulates affect, then non-conceptual becomes a much taller order. The nuance, even in deep states, you generally still perceive 3D space. You don't fall over. Vestibular priors are active. And you recognize light as light. Therefore, you aren't removing all top-down structure. The scientific consensus. It is likely more accurate to say that these states are de-reified, okay, rather than strictly non-conceptual. The brain stops running the semantic and narrative simulations, but the structural and embodied priors, like gravity or body schema, often remain, albeit in a much looser, more fluid state. Okay. Yeah, so some of this stuff is definitely not how I've described how like my intuitions about this. So I'm glad I'm learning like the nuances of this type of telling, because I'm sure this type of thing will come up again. All right, defining real, signal clarity versus ontological truth. This is the most dangerous trap in mysticism. We must distinguish between phenomenological realism and ontological realism. Clarity of signal, phenomenological realism. If we define real as high-precision sensory data undampened by top-down prediction, then yes, these states are more real. You are seeing the actual photon stream with less filtering. I guess that's for visual data. Analogy, standard consciousness is a compressed JPEG. Meditative consciousness is the raw file. The raw file is more real data-wise. Ontological truth, metaphysical realism. Does this raw file give you access to the absolute truth of the universe? No, it gives you access to the absolute truth of your own sensorium. The trap, users often confuse the feeling of hyperreality, which is a biological marker of high precision, with proof of a metaphysical truth. For example, I felt the oneness of the universe, therefore the universe is monistic. The interpretation problem, as you noticed, different brains have different sensors. A bat in a non-conceptual state would experience a real world of sonar textures completely different from a human's real world of color. Thus, the experience remains bounded by the organism's biology. A bat in a non-conceptual state? What is going on here? First of all, aren't bats in non-conceptual states already? Like, aren't they using a completely different mechanism for communication? But let's just say the bat meditates and it can completely inhibit the part of its brain that's generating these types of conceptual top-down signals. I mean, this is also true. I was trying to make the difference between two human beings, but thus the experience remains bounded by the organism's biology. DMN inhibition in the memory reconstruction loop. Your timeline analysis is spot on. How inhibited is the DMN at time t? It is significantly attenuated, but rarely flatlined. Studies show that the DMN's coupling with other networks changes. It stops driving the bus, but it might still be idling. However, in specific events like Narada Samapada cessation, hell yeah, full circle here. Some data suggests a near total temporary shutdown of cortical processing, akin to a momentary anesthesia, but with maintained wakefulness. That's insane. That's really impressive. So yeah, functionally, we can assume in some of these states that you can get to pretty much almost total inhibition here, which means that we wouldn't expect that experience to involve any linguistic aspects of it. Like, you wouldn't experience any words or any conceptualizing in that sense, in that way. You would get to something akin to what Damasio feels is like one of the lower layers of consciousness. Like, you would jump down a layer of consciousness in Damasio's different layers. All right, the memory corruption. T1 to T plus 2, T plus 1 to T plus 2. T, likely encoded not as a narrative, but as a marker of extreme. So this is less important given that, you know, the real issue I would have is the ontological truth problem rather than something like this. This is fine. Because you could still trust your immediate linguistic or semantic labeling. It is, okay. Likely encoded not as a narrative, but as a marker of extreme arousal, valence, and openness. So you're remembering aspects of this experience, but not linguistic aspects. However, T plus 1, the immediate recall, the brain re-engages. The DMN scans the episodic trace. It finds a gap or a blind spot where the narrative usually is. Combined with a high valence marker, the DMN must label this. So the constructivist critique, this is where cultural conditioning strikes. A Buddhist labels it emptiness. A Christian mystic labels it God. A secular psychonaut labels it fractal geometry. So the T plus 2 consolidation. You're right. Once the label is affixed at T plus 1, the memory is reconsolidated with the semantic tag. By T plus 2, T plus 2 for me was the second after T plus 1 in my mind. But T plus 2 is fine. The next day is T plus, 1 million or something. The user remembers the label as much as the experience. The raw non-conceptual data is overwritten by the conceptual explanation. This makes pure reports nearly impossible to capture scientifically. All right, pragmatism. Does feeling real justify being real? This brings us to the philosophical core. If the experience is generated by a unique brain state, does it justify claims of transcendence? The physicalist rebuttal. The feeling of transcendence is simply what it feels like when the parietal lobe, which defines the boundary between me and world, goes quiet. It is a category error to take a failure of the self-boundary mechanism and call it an insight into the structure of the cosmos. So the pragmatist phenomenological defense. However, there is a counter-argument. Our normal state, conceptual thinking, is provably a hallucination designed for survival, not truth. We see doors and opportunities, not atoms and waves. Therefore, a state that removes this survival-based filtering, the non-conceptual state, arguably brings the organism closer to the actual causal structure of the immediate environment, the data stream, than our normal waking state. It is not transcendence in that it leaves the physical universe. It is transcendent in that it leaves the user interface of the brain and peeks at the code. I don't like that type of analogy, but I would just say it literally inhibits the labeling and it allows you just to see raw affect, to experience still the raw affect there. And the affect is going to be a specific way because of this type of synchrony. So you're going to have a more Stan Drake the Mandrake. What's good, Daniel End? You're still going to have like those states of like a lower heartbeat and just a more calm position. But bro sounds so smart that I don't even know how to absorb this shit. I guess my reality of observations and what is he saying is distorted from what he thinks he is saying because of my lack of understanding of communicated understanding of this topic. Well, so first of all, I'm so sorry. Second of all, welcome to the channel. Yeah, we are in like a we're in a really weird rabbit hole to have this type of discussion. This is a we're far into the stream and we're going down like a deep meditation neuroscience topic. Usually on this channel, like we're somewhat in some weeds for like neuroscience behind consciousness stuff, but now, like in this month and the months that are coming up, I'm going to try to focus more on like practical things that we can do to affect our focus, our attention. This is what's bringing us to the concept of mindfulness right now. And yeah, we need to be equipped, just because, you know, when I'm talking with an Alex O'Connor, or, you know, I'm talking with a Sam Harris, I need to be ready to go to be able to make a point about something that I think is important to make and not be totally, you know, unprepared when they push back in some way. So that's really what we had to do there. But yeah, the practical takeaway though is that that meditation, you know, meditation in general can help for so many different things, but specifically these attentional meditations or mindfulness meditation are specifically beneficial and useful for changing how you perceive experience or the world, or in this case we're talking about how you can perceive your own emotional feelings. So someone that is trained, imagine you practice mindfulness meditation for a long time. What we're finding and what the, you know, evidence shows, that you can more clearly notice specific changes in the way that you feel in the moment, and that's really helpful. Not only because it gives you information, like imagine, you know, consciously you're like, oh, now I know this thing, but it's also really helpful for how your body is processing what it's experiencing. So because it understands these changes, it can better regulate your emotions in the moment. Like you're going to be able to withstand a lot more uncertainty and novelty and all kinds of, you know, crazy experiences, because your body's going to be much more attuned and synchronized in how it's communicating with itself. You know, your brain's going to be able to pop off. Let's just say that's the takeaway here. Your brain can pop off if you get a mindfulness practice. Put that on my grave. All right. I unfortunately had to call it there. And okay, life, if you come back, definitely let us know what you're interested in, and we can go down a rabbit hole for that. But thanks everyone for chilling. I mean, that makes sense. If you prepare yourself to conceptualize your feelings, perception of reality, and action triggers, then you will be more equipped to recognize it in the moment. Absolutely. And it's not just like, the two things that we have to talk about here is that, like, so yeah, literally where I was at, this is great. There's preparation in terms of framing. Like I can think of like, this might happen right now, or something like that. Like, oh, it's possible that this thing could be occurring, whether that is a feeling I'm having, or, you know, you're playing baseball and you're expecting something to happen, and that can equip you for the, you know, game moment, I'll say, game day, when the thing actually needs to happen. Like you're already primed to do that thing, and that's one way of preparing. But then there's also the preparing of, and this is what I'm, you know, just putting under the skills of attention section here, like by training over time, like by practicing, by thinking something over and over again, you build, like, you could think of it as a habit of thought. But it's a skill. Like, you're building a skill of this way of thinking, or this noticing, and that affects your future, in a much more powerful way and substantive way than simply just framing in the moment. Even though framing is huge, framing, you can change how your body is reacting to an event almost immediately, and we're gonna have to explore those types of things. But yeah, I like these. It is very, it's a lot of simple stuff, but we're just going down into what we were doing today was figuring out why these things are happening, like in what is happening in the brain that actually leads to this stuff. Well, I'm not going to go that deep in this part 2 of the document, because I don't think it's absolutely necessary for people to have to go into weeds like that. But we do want to have like a pretty comprehensive survey of practical strategies and tools that you can use. I think that would be great. We getting rich, son, with Rich Son. Hell yeah. Rich with knowledge. All right. Sounds like basically offloading the mental requirements for pattern recognition. That is exactly what it is. Yeah. These more intuitive, internalized skills, you could say, or habits, like these don't require significant resources or mental requirements here. You're building these skills that aren't going to require like significant attention and focus and like literally glucose during when you actually need to use them. It's just like how when you learn typing, you have to focus on each of these keys, and you have to do it slowly, and it's actually taking effort. You're learning something, but then once you've learned that, you can type away, and you're now focusing on what you're doing on the screen. Okay, the haters ain't rich. The haters are rich in something. We don't want to throw the haters away. We're open arms, unless they. Daniel End, I'm sorry. It's just a bunch of emojis. Nice. Free my mans. I was out of line, to be fair. Don't ever apologize. Stream Elements is a hater. He clapped back. Well, this has been pretty nice to catch your stream. Thank you very much. But next time I catch you, I hope we can talk more. Yeah, absolutely. What is your usual schedule? It's usually like it's usually 6 p.m. EST to like 8 p.m. EST. I've been starting later than that, so it's actually been recently more like 6:30 to 8:30. And yeah, pretty much every day. That being said, I usually, like weekends are kind of up in the air. I don't have anything scheduled for these weekends stream-wise, but I might just stream. I don't know if it's going to be at the same time, but we'll see. Definitely streaming Monday and Tuesday, and probably more. I need to duplicate these, and I just need to figure out what themes we want to go on for these days, what we want to talk about. But yeah, I'm glad you found us. And yeah, we'll definitely have more good convos in the days to come. I think Stream Elements was threatening you there with the Discord invite. Yeah. Though I guess Discord's kind of a safe haven. Like you're out of Stream Elements' reach, out of its domain. It can't get you there. I can tell from the wall behind you and the SM58 that you are a man of culture. Well, thank you. I do have to switch out these games though. It's which way are we going? There we go. I have to switch out these games. It's been a while since I've switched them out, but I think I'm gonna do Subnautica and I don't know, maybe Outer Wilds again. We'll see. But yeah. No E33. Ooh, that's a good question. to be honest, I think I have E33. So I have a tier list of favorite games, and I think I have E33 on my like A tier of favorite game. By the way, my tier list of favorite games, the lowest tier, I think it might be D tier. These are games I really like. D tier games, I really like these games. And then every tier up from that is like I liked it even more. So I did really enjoy E33, but I don't think it was in my S tier of favorite games, which is what I made these guys of. So unfortunately, I don't have a E33. Oh, nice! Tomorrow game tier list. We could do a game tier list. Yeah, I've got the I've got an Excel sheet that I could show. So yeah, we could do that. That would be a fun topic. I already know what'll be in every tier. What do you think? All the things you've seen so far are my S tiers. So I don't know if I've talked about my A tiers or my B tiers. I met him at Discord parking lot once, and he didn't do anything. It's a real guy, just on everyone's channel. All I care is where Pokemon Emerald is. Okay, so I should say there's like a year cutoff of when I started this tier list. So it doesn't include games prior to like 8 years ago. So like even games like Skyrim, which I really enjoyed, should be on this tier list but aren't there. But I played Ruby when I was a kid, and that would be on this tier list. I don't know where I would put Ruby since it was so long since I played it. I remember really enjoying it, but I don't know how to like connect that with my experiences of these games right now. Maybe we could do that. Maybe I could throw that on there. I have never played AC Black Flag. I have not played AC Black, but I don't think I've played a single AC game. And there, yeah, the other thing is that I don't have any like multiplayer games on there. These are all like single player games. I do have to play the God of War OG. Like that's one I want to play. I did play RuneScape. I was definitely a fan of 07 Scape in 07. I haven't played Crash Bandicoot yet. I haven't played Jackson Daxter. And Halo, I never really got into because I think I missed the mark. Unfortunately, I didn't have a game, not a GameCube. I didn't have an Xbox when everyone was playing Halo. So Sly Cooper, I haven't played Sly Cooper. Ratchet and Clank, no. Sky Pro. Portal's on there. You better bet Portal's on there. Half-Life, I missed the mark on that. I unfortunately didn't play that. Left 4 Dead, I didn't have PC games or I wasn't playing these things on Xbox when they were like big. Mario Sunshine, that one I haven't played, but I really want to play actually, because I think what was Mario Sunshine on? I think I missed Mario Sunshine too. Like, I think I started. I missed like the GameCube. What about GoldenEye? I think I've enjoyed GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64 a lot, but I think it's a terrible game. Like it's like a lot of fun, but it's also just the controls are ridiculous. Mario Sunshine seems like a Stan Summer E.T. chillin' game. What is E.T.? Are we still doing extraterrestrial? Like the fact that you have to like push the stick, like the singular stick upwards to look up, and then like left and right to how did that controlling work? I don't remember, but it was very it is a skill issue now. That being said, you know what? They've made you know what? This game is incredible though. They did GoldenEye 007 PC, right? The PC port. GoldenEye Source? Yeah, I mean, this stuff is still a banger. This is a banger. I did play this a bit, and I thought it was fun. So, Elden Ring is on there. Elden Ring is an S tier. You better bet Elden Ring's an S tier. I don't know how to separate that from the all the DLC stuff. So Shadows of Erdtree, S tier. Night Rain probably wouldn't get to an S tier on its own, but I just put it there, I think. Maybe I didn't. I don't remember. Have you seen the controls in Deus Ex on keyboard? No. Yeah, isn't that game like usually for controller? Did they drop Deus Ex remake yet? Or still up? Were they? I thought Deus Ex was pretty recent. You better go live with this tomorrow because I have so many questions now. Oh no. Yeah, I should say it's you know, I don't believe that my opinions about games are are like objective opinions, you know. They're not. It's not something that everyone needs to have. And I could talk about why I enjoyed games or didn't enjoy games. But oh, we're talking about Deus Ex OG, not the new ones. Am I thinking of the right game right now? Like, I'm thinking of Deus Ex as the sequel to what was that game called? I'm probably thinking of a different game entirely then. Oh, okay. I see what's going on here. Yeah, this is not what I was thinking of at all. Nice. There's something so charming about like a head that's shaped like this. Like it's just that level of curve. Unfortunately, like I haven't played many games that are like modern that have like similar graphic styles, but one of my buddies loves this style of game where, you know, it still looks like it's from 10, 20 years ago, but it's like, you know, a straight up modern type game. Oh, what was that game that was kind of crazy? Something Shot? Ultra Kill? Yeah, Ultra Kill. I think he really liked Ultra Kill. But this, I don't think I have. I'm not cut out for this game. This game is too much for me. This is an alpha game, and I'm a mere less than alpha here. All right. BioShock. BioShock, unfortunately, I couldn't get into the original BioShock, like the first one. Like, I think it's just because, despite the fact that it's so influential, like, I think gameplay-wise, it was very similar to games that, like, I had already played, or not similar, but, like, it was like you know, a rudimentary version of games that have like built on those mechanics. But that being said, I'm still very much intrigued by the BioShock universe. So if they make any type of content, I will absolutely check it out. I haven't played the Infinite though, and maybe I should. A simple rating system would be that anything Valve makes is automatically gold, and everything else needs to meet that standard. My head is shaped like that. Very nice. BioShock is just Ayn Rand's philosophy personified into a game. Unfortunately, I don't know the story that well to know what we're saying there. All right. Next time I stream, we'll definitely do this. It's either going to be tomorrow or it's going to be the next day. Regardless, I'm going to be excited for it. I don't think we have to read this guy anymore, given that, what do we got? Meditation. Let's just go to the conclusion here. Like, is this going to be necessary to read? All right, this is actually, I think this is a more simplistic view than we actually arrived at here. I think we got pretty granular and in the weeds on this one. So I think I'm satisfied. Thank you, Darmadon, for giving us the for giving us this the chat. And I'm gonna put this in our need to watch here. There we go. Yeah. Please post a trigger warning before mentioning Ayn Rand. It's going to take a while to recover from its appearance today. I feel like the trigger warning is the tag philosophy on this channel, unfortunately. I feel like philosophy channels, you could probably just say any of these names. We have an Ayn Rand fan club on Discord if you'd like to join. It's called Onion's Hot Tub. Nice. Wait till we get into the real philosophical topics. What are the real philosophical topics? I feel like we're trying to get out of these philosophical topics. We need to get into the practical now. NOK Life, the background is that we've kind of spent like a year and a half building up part one of this thing I'm writing, which is like the philosophical but it's like the scientific and philosophical basis for how we can think about how we understand the world and our freedom within it. And now part two is like, okay, now let's do some practical stuff and let's figure out how we can identify and pursue our goals. So we got to be decently practical. Granted, sometimes we're going to have to leverage the underlying stuff when pointing out how important dopamine is for our ability to maintain attention and what it how this stuff actually affects like things like procrastination and whatnot. So everyone says, I think therefore I am. The real conversation starts by realizing the first flaw of the statement is I. Very nice. I like it. All right. Let's conclude. Welcome back, Heidegger. True. Heidegger would have beef with even just the word I. You can tell Stan doesn't want to leave us. He likes us too much. Oh my gosh. I'm being stun locked by the chat. All right. Thanks everyone for chilling out. Have a good rest of the day.